beep 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 beep. Beep 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 beep. Test. I guess we should have audio, no? We are working. Yeah, we're live. Hello, test. Yeah. It seems we have a little bit of audio. Let me see. Can move this a little bit, and I can be okay. There it is. The change that I needed was to get closer to the microphone, like from this angle or something like that. It seems, or yeah, kind of over here, basically. Anyways, we have this. I also aside from that. Okay, I need a link over here. Let me put it over here. Yeah, this one. Pin. Yeah, I want to pin. I can also pop out chat. Yeah, correctly. Pop out. Let me put this over here. Okay, there it is. Now I also want to. What do I want to do? I need to set up the YouTube. It goes videos, properties. This one, okay. And I forgot to leave also the number 18, no, number 17 one, so I need to go for that. Let me see. I can't, fuck. I can't write 17. Okay, here I have it. Copy link. Yeah, Discord. It goes over Discord. Replace this one. It is. Which one was it? I can't write this number, I think. 257. This one. Did I make this number right? Yeah, I made it right. Yeah. So this goes over here. And also, what else? This one. It's the actual URL, yeah. And it is for 263, I think. We are on 200, yeah, 263. So let's believe that also. Sometimes I don't know how do I even forget all those things, but I do. So that's funny. But well, I mean, I was also kind of preoccupied because I thought I haven't done anything like what's the word? Use no go have post analyze. That's the word. Analyze anything like what I had been wanting to do, like from the sense of reacting to things, and I haven't done that. Welcome, Savannah. welcome. Here we are. You are yet or still preparing. Welcome. Let me see. I still need also to make some links. I have Discord open, so yeah, interesting, I guess. Let me close this. Let me copy this. Let me put it over here. Yeah, okay. For 20, for 30. you just need to wait, I guess. It will slowly happen. Patience is the way this time around. Patience, enough patience. I sadly I haven't. Not that I hadn't thinking, but I once thought about it, and it is kind of sad that you can't really get points when you are not watching live channel. So that's that, I guess. But at the very least, now you have the opportunity to do it. So it's it made it might happen, it might not, because you need to be like for 400 points, you need to be almost an hour, I think. So it will be a lot. It will be a lot of grinding. Uh, yeah, even more. You sadly you don't even have the what is it the streak, so it will be a lot certainly. But if you believe it can become reality or something like that, I don't know. Let me see. Um, Let me link. I don't have my link at hand. Yeah, I have it. Uh, Here, okay, there it is. Uh, this apply. Yeah, we okay. We have this done. Something else that I should be needing to do. Yeah, God, I forgot about it. Okay. My bad. Let's see. I mean, I have how much time I have left? I have 3 minutes. Yeah, I started so late. Yeah, I started so late. My bad. My bad. I didn't pay attention to that. Chill. Let me chill. Exactly. Let me chill exactly over here. That's what I wanted. Thank you. Okay, this also over here. Wait, wait. I think this is completely unrelated, but we're still at time. I can make this. Wow, we have that emote now. This is amazing. We have that emote. That is quality content. That is probably the best. Ah, and okay. Do we have something else that I should be doing? I think no. This. I yeah. I do have something. Let me open this. Uh, what is 3C? Wait, 3C. You don't have what's the name? You don't have 7TV. 7TV. You don't have that. You can't see that. That's basically a way to add external emotes. I think you can see it on screen. And let me. If if you watch the screen, you will see that it is an emote. No, wait, it also isn't an emote. What? Hello, Vita. Welcome. I hope you are doing fine, Vita. Uh, why does it not show as an emote also? What? On screen. What? But Tracy is basically an external emote of 70. Um, no, it you you really can't see it. I guess. No, this is so sad. Uh, I guess Vita can because he probably also has 70V, but it is another way to show to make the what is it colon 3C face. It is the emote version. Hey, you don't have add-ons, so you can see it, Vita, and you have better TV. Why can't you see it? You really can't see the emote itself. I don't know. I think it is. Maybe it is because it's on. What's the name on 7TV? I use that one here. I really don't know about better TV, so maybe that's that. I guess, but I don't know. Um, Maybe it is my fault. Maybe I don't really know. But anyways, we were on time. So um, let me. Ta-da! We are here. This is amazing. This is quality content. We are here on time. We are not so late. We are finally not so late. It happened, and the best thing, it even happened on a weekday, not even on a weekend. So this is amazing. But anyways, hello everybody. Um, we are once again reunited, all of us for this particular occasion, to keep doing things that are interesting and to keep doing things that might have some interesting value, I guess. I don't even know which category I am, but I forgot to check that. My bad. But here we are, basically. Once again, hello everybody, hello lurkers, hello world watchers, hello particularly viewers obviously also, and even more in particular, um, Vita, Savannah, and sadly, I I will keep demanding this, and you will one day you will probably tell me how to pronounce it, my brother, because I can't for the life of mine guess how to pronounce P numbers. I don't know how to say it, man. But also, welcome to you. sorry, sorry for not being so good at this thing of being the streamer. I guess I don't know. But anyways, here we are. So yeah, uh, that's that. Anyways, hello. And I don't know. I think it is a nice emote, and if you can see it now, you will notice that it is a nice external emote. But I, yeah, it doesn't even show on the thing here on the chat on screen. So this is kind of weird. I guess it is not so known or something. I don't really have a reason as to why that happens. But anyways, here we are. So that's more than enough, and we have ways to fix it. I will say. So that's also good. But yeah, here we are. After what was it? One day we are back to it, and we keep doing what seems very interesting. This time around, as I said it, we are simply kind of going to try and analyze whatever remains on the lecture 18 later on. I guess it is always nice to try and have some um, initial dialogue before, because certainly it does give way for me to not be so sporadic with what I end up thinking about when I am particularly doing something. So it does have some benefits, I think, for everybody. When I do insert almost like an hour or so of purest chatting type. So yeah, that's that, and we'll see how it goes. Because certainly it is an objective of mine to try and also make it consistent. At the end of the day, it doesn't really have that much of an structure what we do, and to give it some sense of logic behind it, and to give it any resemblance of, yeah, proper structure is more than enough, I will say. So as always, um nice. And once again, what a I mean, I can't really get out of it. What an amazing thing to be here, particularly after I don't know. I wouldn't have thought that I was going to be capable of organizing myself to be here today, even less. But here we are. That's wonderful, I guess. So um, always nice to do something that one does enjoy. And as I tend to say even more, even if this is not particularly the by itself most enjoyable activity, because there is certainly some exertion that you do have to realize, or that you actively realize when you are, let's say, I wouldn't say thinking, because that is obviously something that you always do, but um, putting ideas together, something like that. When you're doing something of that sort, you do find that things do have not so much of an enjoyment of, yeah, in and of themselves. But what you also do notice is that they all get, after you have accustomed yourself to that process, they do get a lot more wonderfully practical, because after all, it is another way to give yourself some type of entertainment, while in this case, I don't know still if it is simply another justification of the ego, I think, to say that what we are doing is better than something else, but it does feel nice, and it, I will argue, has some minimal rewards. Once again, I don't really know if that's the case, and even more if that is the proper way to try and catalog any of this, but it, in some sense, feels like that. And yeah, I don't know, I don't know. It always needs some more proper analysis, and when you, in these cases, I guess, when I realize that I have to keep thinking on those things, it feels weird. After all, sometimes one does even feel like there is nothing else to really observe or to spend time um, analyzing, and the reality is kind of the opposite, and very much, um, yeah, very much completely um, out of what one could expect in these cases, because you have to face, I say, so many things that are always lying around and that have even bigger potential than before to give you surprises when it comes to understandings about dif- different things of any sort, that you you find yourself almost exhausted at such an event, I think. But I don't know. The problem is not only that you sometimes give in to the desire to say that you don't really wish to observe yeah, those certain things anymore. On one hand, because there is nothing better than to give to yourself the chance of overcoming different problems that you do find out in your life, but also this the opaque reality created by letting go of what ends up being kind of the responsibility born out of your self actions, those that do lay on your hands, in the sense of knowing that nobody but you can really give you a proper analysis of the things that you want to observe. And even if you don't, not that you want to, you need to observe. And even if you don't want to observe, that is the point, you might have to force yourself to do it, because at the end of the day, the different benefits that you gain, as I said before, even if the whole experience is not that comfortable, the different benefits that you gain are always capable of giving you more and more tools, or different, yeah, different ways to keep yourself afloat and more prepared against different adversities that do present on life, and not only in a sense of stock vision and such kind of weird things, but also in a manner in which you also find out that many other ways in which you do spend your time properly developing a whole net of ideas does back you out, or back up what you are, as to not have yourself to worry so much about things that might happen. Let's say, I don't know, I do have to accept in this case that, for example, I always try to mention something like this, and that I sadly do have very little ways to properly still put it into words. But through time, I think it also becomes very noticeable that I had been trying to properly give it a more comprehensible form. And even if my efforts are not fully there, or not that they are not fully there, the results of my efforts are not fully there, the efforts themselves feel nice. So I don't know. We're slowly moving towards something that someday will make more sense than what I am actually trying to spout without almost any resemblance of idea, I guess, so far. And I don't know. Um, give me a second, please. So yeah. Anyways, here we are. As I said, how much have been already going on? I this time around I haven't really not thinking about anything. I don't have particular ideas prepared. I guess. I mean, I have the excuse that I can try to come up with something, but the reality is I simply say something like that to give myself some more time to think about something to really say, and that is wonderful because oh yeah, this guy has so many things that he wants to say, but he keeps those ideas to himself. Nah, it doesn't happen like that. I simply make excuses and and I relay those moments of confrontation as much as I can. So yeah, sadly, um, I don't really get to be as clever as I seem or as I make myself look. Sometimes I guess I don't know. Also, wait, is this thing has this thing not been working so much? I just noticed that the potato me might not be talking as much as I am. Um, what's going on with that? Is it because I'm not so close to the microphone? Maybe, but I don't want to be so close. Someday I am probably going to find out how to deal with this problem better than to have to be literally sticking my mouth almost to the microphone. But until then, we'll have to deal with me being um, literally glued to the mic so that it picks up myself fully. I don't know even why does it happen like that. And I am pretty sure when I started using it, it didn't give me so much troubles. Or maybe, maybe it is also something more like the effect of realizing that what you had wasn't so perfect, something like that. The, the effect where you grow less and less attached to the things that you constantly live with. So in this case, after like 1 or 2 months already of having this microphone in particular, I am starting to notice the different problems that it does have, I guess. But I mean, there is also right now I am checking it while I am talking, and I also do notice that there is an incredibly big problem. That is, if I am from this particular angle, it works wonders, but that angle and this one are literally probably 10 or 15 grades of separated one from the other. It doesn't make sense that it works so bad, but I guess such a tiny correction shouldn't be so much problematic. I don't know. Anyways, we are fine, and we have a working thing. In this case, a working microphone, so that is more than enough. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I will say that probably I am simply being unnecessarily critical or something like that in reality, and that it might, yeah, as long as it works, we are fine, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know. Here we are. That is more than enough, and that is more than satisfying compared to anything else. So yeah. Um. Anyways, I I now I have for real something else to move on, because this one I wasn't really thinking about before, and this has not really nothing to do with anything else, but it is short enough so that I can give it here without any other context necessary. And that is, as somebody who has been going to school lately, it gets kind of weird to realize how many problems do exist inside of the school, outside of the students' hands, let's say, because it is amazing how little we have been really having classes by themselves. And I don't really mean it in the sense of how damaging it is for the whole society. Well, I mean, not from that sense. How damaging it is to not have so many classes um, for the benefit, or for, yeah, for a more um, appropriate cost benefit sense, or something of that regard. I simply say it as a human being who wants to acquire knowledge provided by somebody who should supposedly be trained in such things and be capable of giving me. I don't even I don't even have a proper idea of which way. As long as they are capable of providing me with knowledge, I am happy with that in this case. And we are not even having that here. And that is very. I can't see it as something else besides sad, because the main the main focus of education is that, to educate, and we are failing at that incredibly bad, man. And I do hope that what I am saying only applies to my country, and applies to what is the actual situation in Argentina and nothing nowhere else. But because it certainly is damaging in the sense of you're robbing people out of the capacity and the desire, or the fulfillment of their desire, of acquiring all of those wonderfully practical ideas that do build a future for them, or at the very least, even if what you're learning on your university, or your school or whatever isn't the main thing that you have been going there for, you are being robbed out of the capacity of, mm, let's say, learn wonderfully useful things. And I don't know, those 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 moments are those notions, I think, are sadly damaging, because at the end of the day, you wish to keep learning, therefore you are putting your efforts towards that. But also, quick question: what is NL? I don't uh, I don't know what is NL. I but I probably can't. If it is outside Argentina, I can't. I am uh, yeah. The best way to say it is, outside of my own country, I am. I have no way of doing something like that. I guess I can't really decide to move out of here. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, NL. What? New Zealand? No, New Netherlands. Netherlands is NL. What? Which one? Yeah. Netherlands. No. I mean, they do, don't they? Yeah. Does Netherlands even speak English primarily? I think they don't, right? I I would I would be glad with the opportunity. It would be wonderful, obviously, and even more because certainly, such a country, being sincere here, such a country might have a lot more opportunities than Argentina nowadays. But I probably, if they don't talk English, um, I probably won't even be capable of speaking what they speak there. I might, I need to practice if I ever wanted to go to somewhere like Netherlands. But yeah, if it will be so wonderful as to also give you the capacity of not missing streams, I will do it. I will gladly do it. But yeah, main limitation is that I am poor. Sorry, but my bad. I bad luck in this one run, I guess. I don't know. It's happened out of nowhere that I I make the wrong choice, and therefore nowadays I am not a landowner to be capable of doing such a bold move in life. But I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, sorry. Spain will be good. I think. I mean, if we're talking about different countries, Spain seems fine, but supposedly it isn't doing so well nowadays. But yeah, anywhere that isn't America, and even more obviously Europe, would be probably would be fine. I don't really speak French, so that would be already a problem. And obviously, I wouldn't want to go to the different slumbers that do exist in France, nor even more, I would want to go to the slumbers in England and the whole what's United Kingdom or anything like that. But if it is a nice area, I would like it. But once again, I don't have money. I am poor. I don't have the opportunity. We're still working for something like that. That such a dream might happen, but like in I don't know 5 years, 6 or so. Right now, it remains an impossible to achieve dream. You know, um, what what sort of huh? What what uh, do do you mean that Netherlands has a king and that the king married an Argentinian, right? I guess no. But as far as I know, Argentina doesn't have a queen, right? Yeah. What? I I guess if it is like that, I guess. Uh, so far, it doesn't really mean anything, sadly, because we don't have any way to go there like a treaty or something like that, where yeah, where the Argentinian queen said, "Oh, you know what? All of my fellow Argentinians, now because I am the queen, I declare hereby I declare that all of you can come to this my our country with a 50% discount in your flight." No, nothing like that so far happened. But it will be fine, eh? I will like it, But no, sadly, it is still the same amount of money what it costs to go there. But uh, I think I remember seeing something like that at this point. I think it probably became what is it a new uh, rather interesting new because obviously Argentinians doing Argentinian things. So yeah, but I don't know. Anyways, we don't have the opportunity so far, sadly. But that's once again that's it, I guess. Um, we elected the biggest hater of immigrant hippie. Oh, yeah, therefore even more. Obviously, I can't. I can't in any way go there. Then sadly, but maybe yeah, in the next elections, you can make a difference and vote for somebody who allows immigrants. Therefore, by doing that, you can ensure that I can go to Netherlands in the future. You know, something like that. But I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't really escape Argentina so far. As I said, obviously I am poor. If I had the money, I don't know what I would be saying. But taking into consideration that I am poor, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't lose everything to be in an even worse situation. Um, but I don't know. We are fine. So far, we're fine. I am alive. That is the most important thing here, and that is enough so far. mm, when it comes to countries, I guess. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't really know what to say in that sense, but a proper response will be something along the lines of it is obvious that whoever we vote won't probably win, or single individual votes won't really mean anything because we live in such a system that there are so many individuals all putting together their efforts that one single vote doesn't really equal any change at all. And I think Netherlands is pretty reduced on its population still. But even with that, it doesn't really mean that by voting you tip the balance in any way, sadly. So, at the very least, by fulfilling your obli- social obligation of voting, you did well, but mm, it really isn't that useful for us to vote nowadays. And I mean, I learned that one of the easiest ways to gain money from people like from here, at least in um, what is it, election times, is when you take afterwards the different um, not bribes, what is money, what tickets and such. When you take this um, tickets and mults that you get from the people that you didn't vote, obviously, because a lot of people would rather not vote than to go, because a lot of people also knows that it really doesn't mean anything, sadly, to go and put one tiny drop of water in an incredibly big ocean of people all deciding who goes to the power and such. I guess I don't know. I don't really think about politics that much, but something more probably useful will be to do campaigns and such and say, wow, this one guy is so good for everyone. Why don't we, as a city or something, group all together and decide to vote this one person? It will be better than to live in the same situation that we did the last X amount of years. But it doesn't really happen that the average civilian does have any interest in solving their situation. And I mean, even if it happens, because what I was talking about before, our actual education system, we have people trying to route against the actual, not actual government, but more like those who decide what is going on with schools and such, that it is annoying already that we are literally not getting anywhere with already, yeah, being already 2 or almost 3 months in classes while really not getting anywhere. And even when people decided to try and tell this way in a orderly protest, they were inefficient kind of, or not inefficient, that they could have done it better, more like they were incapable of doing something relevant in the sense of gaining enough, yeah, and popular enough view on their actions so that they could in any way get their views approved as something that was truly a change necessary for the, in this case, educational system. And if something that had so many people involved didn't work, how much more it sadly does happen that if you decide to rally with your comrades or whatever you want to say it, to vote one guy will really still mean nothing at all. But I don't know, I mean, I, it sounds kind of cynical, but I guess to give people the illusion that they have more power with their votes is better than to let nobody votes, therefore have somebody elected by 3 votes and such, you know? But I don't know. I don't know. I think after after all that happens consistently in this world, um, there are always things that do occupy a bigger, yeah, a bigger portion of our minds with worries. I mean, it's obviously, I not obviously, uh, fortunate, yeah, fortunately enough, nobody here, I hope, has to deal with something like hunger and such to find themselves thinking about those problems that do are more worrisome than simply, wow, somebody might be governing us for the next 4 years, and such things might change that literally affect me in no way, or do so in such a tiny degree that I am going to, instead of getting after these 4 years in my bank account $10,000, I will only have 990. Wow, this is so radical. I cannot believe this. No, nobody's really thinking that much, and if you are preoccupying yourself, you might as well be losing sight of things that do have more worrying sides to it. Like, I don't know, protecting yourself and having proper mental health, that is something that literally no governor can do for you. And in a in an ideal world, probably it could be solved through somebody who decides to enforce as a law that every single civilian needs to take care of their mental health. But it won't happen because it also means that we need to spend a lot of money on doing such activities. And to spend so much money will mean that we need to reorganize everything so that we are simply circulating that money and not that it is being fully spent. Because sadly, um, things like education are also incredibly important, quote unquote. And because they are so important, there are so many people trying to occupy those positions that those who somehow get there are incapable of providing enough for the rest of the world who needs to get those services provided to them mostly in a sufficient manner so that everybody can learn and adapt and get all the resources that they need for the real life that exists beyond the knowledge inherited through a class mm, that they decided to attend. And I don't think it will be solved by simply saying, wow, we're doing so well. But once again, these different problems are so big that it doesn't simply happen that one governor can solve all of those situations by themselves. And at least today or nowadays, we don't have a mentality where we see ourselves as such important human beings when it comes to taking an active role in any of those situations. Once again, if you say to somebody that you're so worried about politics, what's about, instead of talking so much about politics, trying to go and act in a manner in which you get also other people interested in politics. I don't, I don't, I don't really care about politics. Therefore, you won't ever see me involved with politics. Not that I care so much. That's why I only discuss it here. No, man. If I was really discuss, I would be engaged actively in trying to show others how to be part of my political party or whatever. But wow, no. How can you wish to be a member of a political party? Don't you know that they are all corrupt? And whatever other methods to discourage people from doing something minimally useful and from pursuing such not simply ideals, but more like such optimistic views and objectives. After all, you need to try and have those particular things to aspire. And if you are robbed out of those possibilities, obviously, first and foremost, because somebody else simply said, you know, you don't need to be part of X or Y, or you don't need to try and mobilize others. You certainly are missing out on something as necessary when we are so social and when we are so advanced and we have so many other things already fulfilled in our lives, something that ends up being as necessary, I think, as a proper hydration or a proper diet, you know? Because if you can't even fulfill a role like that, because somebody else simply decided that, wow, you're not worth it, it might as well be not simply negative, but also, what is it, disencouraging and, give me a second, tackling or something like that, horribly, horribly bad. But I don't know. Once again, we're not dealing with those problems. And anyways, hello, Klondike, welcome. Also, now that you do that, I will have to show this off as much as I can because I am proud of this one. Watch this, Klondike. Amazing, don't you know? Don't you think? ah, we have that. We have the 3C. But anyways, welcome. I hope you're doing well, my man. Here we are. Simply, so far, how much I have been talking? Holy, almost an hour so far. But well, we're getting, what is it? Ready to discuss for real, or to analyze, sorry, the the lecture 18. We're still, as always, going to be here for some more minutes. We are not going to do that so far. We're still getting ready. But anyways, yeah, very cool, very cool. Water, what a beautiful thing. Anyways, I didn't even see. I I can do whatever I want. Let me see how long is the whole lecture because I didn't check this time. Okay, I think this one doesn't have copyright because it lasts 1 hour and 11 minutes. So probably this one is full, complete. Probably. I hope so because the other one was literally half an hour. So we'll see how this one goes. But anyways, I don't know. Yeah, we were. I don't know if it was politics or what, but we were discussing something of that sort, and I finished my point. I guess with what I said at last that it ends up being necessary for people to try and be active in society in such ways, and even more, what I was also trying to say, it is incredibly useful for the human spirit to be part of such structures because you do gain ways not simply to identify yourself, because it isn't the main objective to now say that you form part of X or Y, but more like you do gain ways to solidify your existence in a manner in which you can also know that you are being useful in something. Because there is, I haven't truly trying to think about it, and I think one of the best ways to escape out of what feels like hopelessness is to know that you're in any way in particular being useful. And after all, if nobody ever tells you that you're doing something minimally good or you're participating in something that you inherently know is useful, how can you wish to remain hopeful in a world in which nothing can really provide you with that, let's say, if you don't seek it out? So, to try in those cases to aim for something that does give you that sense of not simply purpose, but also of usefulness is what ends up leading to a fulfillment that almost nothing can can replace, I guess. Obviously, you also have distractions and such things that do work wonders for the mind. After all, even more because as an individual, we always crave to be as distracted as possible from the daily life situations that do occur throughout time, and by doing so, we also try to find how can how much we can be distracted, sorry, with different yeah meaningless things, and when doing so, we don't really get to feel like we are doing something of any sort. We're simply pursuing something that is constantly changing, so that we don't have to be thinking. Let's say, and even more in the modern world, we have so many things that do act as a, the thinking machine for us, that we can be fully immersed in something that is, once again, constantly changing, so that we feel we are always accomplishing something new, when in reality, as with everything, we do get tired out of such things, and with time, or with enough with enough time given to anything, we end up running out of the desire of participating or consuming or indulging in whatever type of thing we find ourselves in. And unless it has a way to keep refreshing itself always, we will unavoidably fall out of the habit that was born of trying to pursue such things. But to notice that you are not being any more capable of being there is to be capable of accepting that once again you are doing something unfulfilling. And if you do know that what you are doing is unfulfilling, you now also have to deal with the dread that is, which thing then might be fulfilling enough so that you can use your time there. And also, obviously, you sadly have to deal with the notion that you might have been spending your time wisely on something completely negative before. So, even more then, how can you even wish to do something good if you have been before that completely useless? And it will always feel bad, but if the human can deal with such problems, it can probably, in those cases, overcome almost any difficulty that arises, because more, well, not more often than not, um, a part of the problems that do occur throughout life is dealing with such sentiments. Some others might be related to loss and grief and whatever, but the one that you experience because you know that, or you learn, sorry, that what you were doing before was not in any way really meaningful to you, um, can be dealt. And once you find a way in which you can solve it, you almost find yourself never more dealing with it, because the creation of such an objective that you do now know fully that what you are trying to go for is really useful to you is never replaced by anything else. Presupposing that the human which we are talking about is capable somehow of coming up with such an idea that they never once again ask themselves is if what they are doing or what they are trying to do is useful enough. But I don't know, it doesn't always happen like that, I guess. So I can't really express myself that much in that manner. And obviously, even more, I'm still simply trying to think about it to make even more sense. We can once again trace this back to what I made the last two quote unquote lectures. And I don't know, it always is nice to see such concepts and to see once again how much not only you can have them integrated to you, but how you can utilize them later on for the sake of somebody else. Because it seems almost weird once you find what is your goal, that others might somehow not have their own goal defined when it was the wow, so grandiose scheme of everything tiny what you did, that certainly it couldn't be as hard for somebody else, right? But it it is impossible to really know. There is, or not to really know. Sadly, sorry. I guess it is impossible for me to empathize that much. Um, but that is also my reality. I was never that much of an empathizer in any sense. So sadly, I can't I can't really put myself in the shoes of somebody else and say or notice what they are talking about that good or that properly. And even if I wish to do so, I still, not simply that I fail, but more like I still think about such things and how to solve them. But certainly, when that is one of those problems, I guess, that when you are not part of them, you can't really say, wow, um, how much I lack this thing, how much I want it. I, I say in my case, I don't really care, and it becomes almost a habit to not really care after a certain point. But something different also is, I don't know. I mean, it makes yourself overly conscious, no? But there is also an interesting concept, and that is that to a certain extent, some type of people tend to overly rationalize the different problems that they have because they are literally hiding themselves from the possibility of thinking about them, not simply as something that happens with everybody, but more like they describe it so profoundly that it stops making sense as a sentiment and it simply arises as a notion and as a cognition born out of um, almost repeating the different words or the different speeches that they heard throughout somewhere else about those topics that they are so much talking about. In these cases, I don't really know if what I was saying was really my own creation or something that I had unconsciously already paid attention to and regurgitated, as they would say here. So yeah, that is one of those wonderfully uh, practical ways to check yourself also because it is the point of knowing that is that when somebody is doing it, they are not really dealing with those emotions. So I might not really be dealing with the problem that I am not an empathizer at all. But we will never know. So far, I might simply be hiding from dealing with that reality. We don't know. I guess I don't know. Sometimes it's it's weird to know to simply have knowledge about so many things. I guess because that was one another thing that did give way for me to observe and to ponder so many notions. I guess I don't know. They feel still, anyways, nice, and they feel even more good to have in mind because after all, to give a way to explain them instead of being so lost in what is an impossible to describe sensation is better than to be simply lost in the sea of, yeah, of occult feelings that you do have that you can never get to express. So I don't know, I don't know. It, in this case, I guess it gets too personal. So yeah, that's that. I will say that's that. I don't know too much introspection. Sorry. Sorry, go man. But yeah, um, going back into the topic, we're almost in time to to switch into the analysis of the thing. So let me start to set that up in particular. Thank you. Let me see because I already have the video. I already have. I think I almost have everything else set up. No, I think. Uh, Well, yeah, I don't really get to know it. Okay. Let me. Wait. I know. I'm trying to get to annotations of. Thank you. Two of these. We have that. This amazing, and that is. Ah no, wait. I need to mute this. There it is. I need to mute the clock, and I didn't. There it is. What was that big, my brother? What up? I don't know. Anyways, also something that I barely take notice of is every single lecture or every single introduction has the description after the lecture number. That is, in this case, we are going to see adult development. I never noticed that, not at the end, but I just paid attention to what it says. Nice. So now, now we know what we are going to do. Anyways, yeah. I guess we can start. No, after. No, we can't. Give me a second. Give me a second because I forgot to change. I think no. I think I can do it here through chat, right? There it is. This is amazing. No, the bot is not working. Fucking bot. I love it. I love the bot. Give me a second. Give me a second because I have to do it by hand. This is wonderful. This is the streaming experience, I guess. I don't need to name it, my brother. Let me. There it is. What? It changed? What? What? It. What? I guess so. Okay. Thank you. I guess the bot is working somehow. I don't know. Anyways, now for real, we can start with this. What the fuck?
Under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT
Wait.
continue to offer.
Wait. Playback. 1.25. Thank you. Let me.
High quality
Shut up.
educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from
No,
hundreds of
spam.
MIT.edu.
No. This. Real. We have started. Goodbye.
So in some ways, I won't be able to compete with live demonstrations of children from last week, but I will try to talk about adult development, and we will really sweep through your minds and brains from when you were not yet born until you're going to be in your 90s. Okay, so here's your life from the beginning to the end. Viewed in different ways, and we'll touch on a number of different topics. So this question about people talk for a long time about the development that one goes throughout one's life. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, 3 legs in the evening? You know the answer to this, right? People, right? They're crawling, they're standing up, and then you get to my age, and we need an extra little prop to move around successfully, right? And so sort of thinking about this, that different things matter to people at different ages, that there's different priorities, different ways of thought. Erik Erikson is often given credit for trying to articulate that. And we'll just walk through it for a moment, where he said, at different ages, in infancy, early childhood, through school, adolescence, young adulthood, people are dealing with different kinds of issues and different developmental tasks in front of them, that your life is a constant development, not maybe as dramatic as infancy, where we saw last time that children really see the world differently. But there's different challenges in front of you at all ages. And so, in infancy, you're deciding who can you trust, who can you love, is it a good world, right? And then the drama of potty training, independence, how much are you becoming a free agent in the world? Early school, you start to interact with other children and play and make friendships and think about social groups. Later in school, as you're becoming more advanced in terms of what you're learning in school and more complex in terms of the social networks that you're developing. The much discussed, we'll come back to this at the end, period of high anxiety and drama of adolescence. Something about young adulthood. You may have heard recently people have been speculating that what used to be the beginning of young adulthood culturally, at least in the US and maybe Europe and industrialized parts of the world, that whereas the 20s used to be considered a decade of adulthood, there's now theories floating around or impressions floating around. The 20s are the new adolescence. Okay, what do you guys think?
What?
Everybody says, "Oh, my 20s, I'm going to discover this, I'm going to discover that." But when I get to 30, that's when we're playing for keeps. Is that? Yeah? Well, in part it's because you live longer on average, or you count on living longer, and you do, on average, live longer, right? For a person who's counting on living to 90, which many of you are, sort of, another decade of finding your way, your 20s, seems reasonable, right? In a world where people didn't live nearly as long, didn't have as many options, time you finish college is or many people didn't go to college, is roll up your sleeves and get to adulthood. So there's been all these sort of magazine discussions that are the 20s the new teens, okay? In terms of whether people feel they have responsibilities they have to execute as a young adult. And this is a little bit timed also, from a little bit anachronistic, because then having a family, although I think we're much more thinking about that's not necessarily the route for everybody at all. And then old age, where you give other people lots of advice. Okay, so.
Well, I think okay. We started obviously kind of strong. I didn't pause for like 2 minutes, no, 4 minutes. So yeah, we did a little bit of diving this time, but I think a lot of things that are being discussed so far are pretty much understandable. There are obviously things that we don't really observe. Sorry for saying the thing so many times. There are different concepts that we don't really analyze as such when we are in those moments. Like, we are not thinking when we are kids how we are developing for the sake of becoming more sociable, or how it is when we are in the early adolescence, how we are creating our networks of friends and known people and such. So obviously there are differences between the concepts or the names of the concepts and the things that we go through throughout those times. Yes, but the main idea is still pretty much understandable so far because it applies to everybody. And I guess the main point here, at least for me, to stop to think about is what ends up being supposedly, almost a side joke. The idea that the new teens might be the 20s is certainly something worth analyzing, I think, because after all, it has a lot of sides to it that do have different, let's say, different notions behind it that seem kind of weird because on one hand you do observe that certainly we have a lot of hand in our times, but I think it is better to live more organized and to live more how to say it, more structured in your life. It always is better to be more, to know better what you want, not to spend so much time freely wandering throughout Earth. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Also, as always, there is no real obligation to be. Yeah, I think that is the response. There is no real obligation to be here, Sauna. I guess, but how to not be so okay? You might also gain the possibility of hearing something worth it. Let's argue. Let's assume that I have something worth to add to this one view, but we're simply doing it because it is joyful. Maybe think about it this way. Maybe you have your books. You can check what your books say, and come back to here and say, what? This thing that they are mentioning here is wrong. And that will be wonderful. That will be as useful as nothing else can be, because we are going to have somebody who can also correct the different positions or ideas that are being discussed here. If that is what you meant. If you meant that you have to leave, sorry for not interpreting that correctly. But yeah, going back into the idea. Anyways, uh, I feel like it certainly is weird to see yourself as something that is going to last longer throughout life. After all, you have no obligation to really believe that you're going. Not that you have no obligation. You shouldn't see yourself as someone so fortunate to live so long, because even more in nowadays society, we don't even know how many different diseases we are creating, and we are already surrounding ourselves with, based on the different conditions that do exist, based in the world and the different, what is the word, different things that do occur throughout time. As in, we don't know how much microplastics, for example, are affecting our life expectancy, on or how much damage it is doing to us. The amount of what is it, antibiotics that we're taking throughout life, as we don't have enough evidence to back up such claims. But it still remains very useful, I guess, to believe that you're going to last longer, to have even longer objectives throughout life. But at the same time, I mean, I see it as good to analyze, because it has one main side, and that is that you, as an individual, don't really get to decide how long you're going to last. And if you are presupposing that you are going to live X amount of years, you might as well be carrying out your life unnecessarily bad because of such notion. After all, let's say, if you now integrate into your consciousness or into your perception of the world that the 20s are the new teens, you might believe that it is good for you to be a teen, somebody who only does things that a teenager does throughout your whole 20s, and to act in such an insightful manner that you're going to spend so much of your time doing activities that later on you do realize were literally not useful for you in any particular way. And even more obviously, you're going to spend time that you will have rather given to your different objectives and goals throughout life, than to be part of a world in which you believe that it is good to do nothing and be part of nothing, as it is not a necessity for the teenager you. Um, I see it from that side in particular, because I think introducing such an idea might as well be almost damaging. After all, I mean, you're not introducing also a way to say, no, this isn't really like this. You're almost giving simply way for people to say, or to find, or to shield themselves behind the excuse that, wow, no, you know what? I am part of the new. Yeah, I am still in my teenager years. Even if I have a 23 years old, I can spend as much time as I want doing nothing, because I have no obligation of being useful to anybody. I have still to discover what I want in life, man. If you, at such stages in life, haven't found what you want, or haven't tried to start to define what you want, you might be committing an error somewhere along the way. Or those who told you that it was good to spend so much time being and doing nothing might as well also committed an error, because you do certainly need to know what you want to go for, and know what you even more wish to have going on in your consistent existence. You can't be so um, unbound by this, not simply desires, by goals in that sense. Not because you need them, but rather because if you don't have them later on, when you do find them, you will observe and you will have to deal with the consequence or the ultimate consequence of realizing how much spent time you had in your background as something that could have pretty much been used on these things that you now know you fully love. I don't know. I think it is something weird, but it was also, as I said, a sideshow, not really a main point here. There was literally not even any slide for this concept, so we might move on from this one, I believe. Um, I guess I don't know. I mean, you also still you also still have the counterpoint of saying this one lecture was 2011. How much more this one idea is in the unconscious mind of the masses, and how much damage it had already done or it is already doing, because people believe that they have so much more free time instead of really taking life as what it is, the only thing that you can spend your time not doing. But anyways, continuing. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about brain development from infancy to young adulthood, cognitive stability and decline in adulthood. We've talked a little bit about that, talk a bit more. Alterations in hemispheric specialization that come with aging. A bunch of remarkable results about exercise in the brain. All of us want, as we get older, or just even when you're younger, maybe just a pill you pop and you're ready to go, right? That would be the best. It turns out there's remarkable evidence about what physical exercise does for the brain. I'll share that with you, especially in regards to aging, but at all ages. Ideas about how as you get older, your social and emotional goals will tend to change, a little bit about rewards, and a little bit about back to adolescence and some rethoughts about what's going on in the adolescent mind and brain. So we know if there's one thing about the brain that's stunning and challenging to grasp and empowers us to be humans, it's its complexity. Huge number of neurons, fantastic number of connections among the neurons.
I mean, wait. Did say what I want to see? Wait, give me a second. Sorry.
In the adolescent mind and brain. So we know if there's
No, okay. So, once again, time to unpack a little bit what we just heard. Where, yeah, the previous ideas we already saw, that is, what is the the brain development throughout infancy to young adulthood. So that is something that we don't need to delve on, but almost everything else is not touched on so far, or a little bit of the last point, that is gist versus specificity in decision making, a little bit. That was also analyzed, I think, but yeah, once again, everything else is not so touched. Yeah. So, anyways, damn, this seems to be a lot, man. Um, we start with first and foremost what is cognitive stability and decline in adulthood, and that is the capacity that is being lost throughout time to realize higher, yeah, higher level of cognitions related to dense, not simply activities, but densely densely complex, yeah, densely complex emotions and different, yeah, this time I can't avoid saying it, activities that you do engage in throughout life. But this also is counterpointed with the capacity of assuming the or accustoming yourself to those things throughout life, because you do have the capacity of being part of those different things with enough time and with enough not simply, yeah, repetition. And even somebody who is 50 years old is capable of learning new things throughout basing themselves and basing their different learnings on what what can be defined as um, those muscle memories and such. And obviously, there are some things that are more mental than physical, but they can still be quite categorized under the muscle memory type because you are relying on consistent patterns that you always predict as things that you do know always derive into certain results. So you really see ways in which you can keep learning even if you're old enough, and that is one side. The other one is obviously how much you have taken care of your mental plasticity and how much you do engage in things that do stimulate your mental plasticity, because once again this idea that different ideas always related to the ones that you already know can integrate better is an incredibly important factor when it comes to giving all of those new concepts a form and a place in your mind. If you don't give yourself the chance of integrating anything like that or taking into account those things to execute your activities throughout life, you might as well find out that sadly what you are doing is simply trying to force new ideas to enter what you are not capable of fitting, because sadly, obviously, you don't have in any way the capacity of enjoying those those moments of happiness that come by finding out as X is related to Y, because you are simply trying to force X to enter in your mind when all you had was A, B, and C, let's say. So things like that are also important. Anyways, um, continuing, the second one is what gets described here as the alteration hemispheric asymmetry with age, and that is a little bit easier to explain. It simply happens, or it simply has to deal a little bit more with different tendencies that the brain tends, yeah, tendencies that the brain tends to follow, um, and that is the more you get accustomed to doing something, the more you are going to find pathways being optimized to do that same thing. You're in no way going to change how you act out of nowhere, unless obviously the situation requires such type of actions. But commonly, you're always going to be um, certain something or act in a certain way, and that once again fits back into itself so that you keep consistently doing those things and such. Now, the third one that was, I think that I, at this point I am pretty sure it was said that these are going to be explained. But anyways, that is how much exercise, aging, and the brain are all related, and this one is one of the most important and deep ones to try to unravel here even more. So I really hope it is talked about here because different ways in which exercise does um, affect your. I was to I was about to say your end game. Yeah. uh, affect how you feel and how you unravel throughout life. Um, when you are a later adult, they all have an incredibly big connection. And if you give enough time to yourself to exercise and to pay attention to all of those things that are related to care, you can take off yourself firsthand and quote unquote easily. All of those things might change from 20 to 40 years how much your life expectancy changes. So there, yeah, here I can't completely derail into explaining how all of these things do work and how all of these things do have an incredibly big impact in what is your later life. But yeah, there is a very big connection here and a very noticeable one nowadays. You sadly need to delve a little more in these topics by yourself if you want to know, but there is more than enough notions and explanation about them. I hope that you can find them logical and integrate them in your life. Anyways, moving to the fourth one. that is this social-emotional selectivity and amygdala. And those, was there a little bit explanation? What? I hope there was a little bit of explanation. I don't really want to go back to watching this one in particular because it will take us like a minute or so until I find it. But if I am not wrong, this is also talking about the capacity or is associated with what ends up being the first two that we discuss, the cognitive stability and the alterations in the hemispheric asymmetry with age. And that is to notice how you also tend to act in certain ways the more you believe those things, let's say. So you are more um, emotionally, you also tend to be more of a certain kind the more you once again engage in those types of emotions. And not only that, but also when you take into account the social part, what your environment dictates to you that is good to act upon or act like also plays a big role here. Because if somebody tells you that you shouldn't in any way be so, I don't know, so incredibly brave as an individual, you will learn slowly that you should no, in no way be so brave. Therefore, you will slowly believe that it is necessary for you to not be so brave. And the more you believe in such things, the more you give way to these ideas, the more you will keep be once again feeding back into them and letting all of those things take control of what is your later stages of life ways to act, because at such points you stop believing or you stop asking so much if x or y is correct to do or to act like, and you simply go because you supposedly know well enough at those stages what is good and what is bad. So yeah, that is that I guess. um, and well, the reward system of the brain, what is, was I not paying attention? Why I don't even know what says here. Eh, what? What is the point here? The reward system of the brain. I can only explain it as yeah, when you are more of an adult, you get more addicted to certain things because you have already developed yourself biases towards those things probably throughout life. But I I can't come up with a proper explanation if there is nothing else to really say. What? Yeah, the reward system of the brain. Take notes. Wow. Anyways, what?
A little bit about back to adolescence and some rethoughts about what's going on in the adolescent mind and brain. So we know if there's one thing about the brain that's stunning and challenging to grasp and empowers us to be humans, it's its complexity. Huge number of neurons, fantastic number of connections among the neurons. So there's just phenomenal complexity that all starts, right, with a single cell. And how does the brain become this dramatically complex organ? And how does it organize in the right way to let you be an effective learner, an effective partner in your family, and so on? So we start with the idea of neurogenesis, a magical word, the neurons being born. They have to make this crawl. There's a huge path for the size of a neuron from the ventricular surface, the ventricle, the fluid-filled space, to get to the place you're going to be in the brain. It's a huge adventure per neuron. Cells dividing there. The earliest neurons are existing about the second embryonic week, so that's when you began to produce your neurons in your brain. By the seventh embryonic week, so you're just 2 months of pregnancy, you're producing 500,000, an estimated 500,000 neurons a minute. We said a neuron is kind of like a moderate computer, except unlike iPhones, it can't keep track of where you're going all the time, right? But we said it's a moderate computer. 500,000 of those every minute. I mean, it's staggering, right? That it all works out is staggering. By the 18th week, you've mostly made all the neurons you're ever going to make for the rest of your life, except in 2 brain regions. And there's a big debate in the last decade about another brain region. I'll share those with you. But people have been taught for many, many, many years in medical school and college and graduate school that all the neurons you get are by the 18th week. So hang on to them through healthy living and wise behavior, right? Because you have what you have, right? So don't lose them. But we'll talk about that you lose a vast majority of them anyway, naturally. I still recommend healthy living. Because you know, perhaps from other courses, that the brain does this wild thing, that it excessively overproduces by massive scales the number of neurons and the connections among the neurons. And then through use, it gets rid of neurons and gets rid of connections among neurons, right? Exactly the opposite way if you built a building. If you build a building, what do? You construct every bit of it you need and you're done. What you don't do is say, I need a 2-story building, so I'm going to do a 40-story building or a 90-story building and then knock off the stories as they're not needed. You say, well, that's wild. Why would I do that, right? But the brain brilliantly makes many more neurons and many more connections on epic scales and then only uses the ones that seem to be useful for the functions of the brain. And so for that reason, the number of the density of the neurons in the brain is much higher in a 2-year-old than in you, where it was much higher when you were 2 than it is now, okay? So in a 2-year-old, they have 55% more gray matter density in the frontal lobe than an adult. Even at age 5, even at age 7, they're 10% more. So you're constant, from a peak of around before birth, you're constantly shedding neurons and their connections and keeping the ones that seem to be effective somehow.
Okay, yeah. This one isn't. I'm so. Yeah, I'm not so wrong. This one is a little bit more complex than the last one, but it is all interconnected. So I guess it shouldn't be that hard. I hope. I don't know if I can really start particularly somewhere. I mean, I guess I can more properly simply respond to what what was said. So yeah, what we take into account here is that the amount of neurons that do exist throughout time and that do exist throughout your life, in a sense of how much you're really creating, and to something that I do seem lacks to be put here is supposedly how you at a certain point stop producing more neurons and such, but maybe that might be a problem on my side because I might believe that there is a point in which you fully stop developing them, maybe, or something like that. I guess, I hope, but as yeah. Anyways, what does happen and what gets talked about here is how much you're always. Yes, I always 2 times in a row. You're much always producing neurons and how much you are always creating this amount of cells in your brain so that you can be ready for them, for the usage of them throughout your life, and even more how much you have all of them ready to play any role necessary in your head at any given point in time, but that they are also slowly disappearing. And this is one concept that I do find out useful on trying to seek this as rather logical, because it sadly lacks the explanation that while you do lose supposedly the amount of brain cells that you do have, the reality is simply your brain learns how to optimize the different pathways that takes to have certain actions realized. It isn't, the allegory here was you have X amount of you want to have a 2-story building, therefore you build even a 90-story one, and after that you slowly try to destroy the rest, when the reality is you have an infinite budget to create as many buildings as you can. So you go with something like a 90-story one, and later on, with time, you learn that what you might have needed is just a 2-story one. And after so much time, so much perfection of that process, you slowly get rid of those that you don't need. And this is where the allegory kind of fails, because when you build a story, what? You build a building. If you try to remove something, you need to do it carefully enough so that nothing gets destroyed in the way. But in the brain, it doesn't happen that. Also, as what Klondike kind of says, you shed your neurons or something like that. You simply remove the matter from there and you take it somewhere else so that it can be also utilized in different areas of the body, because you don't only have neurons in the brain. The whole I mean, that's the name of it. Neurolimbic system has neurons throughout your whole body so that you can be aware of other things. And um, the more you give attention to those particular things that you do require to perform in your life and that you have almost a necessity of doing, the more you can also let them be properly done. Because, practical example, a 1-year-old can't walk as good as a 5-year-old can, and even less, a 5-year-old can walk as good as somebody who is 20 or 50-year-old can, despite obviously, or supposing that they have no physical limitations imposed on them. All of them walk completely different because the more you know how to do something, the better you become at that. What I mentioned before here. And this production of cells doesn't only have this one thing, but also there is this whole side in which maturation also comes with the notions born out of your society. And that is why, once again, it isn't really mentioned here, so maybe we will oversee it later on. But the frontal lobe has a lot of sides or has a lot of things related to its maturation coming from the social input, not decided by the person itself, as long as they don't take the advices that they are given as invalid. Um, the social environment dictates a lot of what needs to be ingrained in your brain also. So that is why maturation keeps occurring after, as it is said here, the 18th embryonic week or something like that. It won't simply out of nowhere disappear. So yeah, I guess that's that. I hope I didn't miss anything this time around. But anyways, continuing.
Shedding.
Yeah, shedding or brain cells is almost necessary.
Neurons and their connections and keeping the ones that seem to be effective somehow. Now, for many years, people have said, is there neurogenesis in the adult brain? Is everything you get before you're born, and that's pretty much it? And there's many reasons to be interested in that. One is just, how does the brain work? How do people work? The second is for diseases like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and other diseases, we would love to replace neurons that have died to help people do better. So can the brain make new neurons past before birth? There's compelling evidence in animals and some indirect evidence in people too that neurogenesis does continue into adulthood in the olfactory bulb and in a particular part, and I'll come back to this, of the hippocampus, a small part of the hippocampus called the dentate gyres. Everybody's in pretty much agreement on this for the moment, which is kind of interesting. Why those two areas amongst all the areas in the brain? What makes them different that they can produce neurons all throughout your life? And then about a decade ago, Elizabeth Gould of Princeton said, oh, you know, when I do the right kind of experiment, I see new neurons in the prefrontal cortex of monkeys, of, infrahuman primates. That was a giant revolution because I said, wait a minute, maybe if monkeys are doing it, people might be doing it, making neurons throughout their life. We just didn't know that. It's not so easy to measure, okay? If you think about it, the kind of experiment to know for certain if a human is making a new neuron is not so easy because brain imaging is very far from the single neuron level. And even if we saw a neuron, how could we tell it's new? So, and then there's, Pascal Rakich, a big developmental researcher at Yale, said that what she
I mean, this is a simple side launch, but obviously we want to make up the technology yet to observe after how many 13 years of this one lecture, how much it really took to, yeah, how a neuron looks inside of the brain. We have so far only discovered how it all connects outside in a laboratory environment where you have a neuron laying around and trying to simulate its functions in a very controlled, once again, environment, but it is not in the brain. What we saw was some time ago when it became popular that we recreated how neurons look and how they interconnect to one another.
Really thought, what she really saw was glia. The glia are the other cells in the brain, not the neurons. They support the neurons. Everybody agrees that you make glia all through your life, all right? There's no debate about that. But glia are not the stuff of thoughts and feelings. Neurons are. So what do we understand about that whole story? Here's an unbelievable experiment, I think, or it's really not an experiment, but it's a measurement. So here's, published in 2006 as one approach to asking, do adults make new neurons. And so the nuclear bomb tests that occurred during the Cold War sent carbon-14 into the atmosphere from 1955 to 1963 until there was an international test ban treaty, and then these decreased and stopped. But there was a lot of nuclear bomb testing in the late 50s and 60s. That released carbon-14 into the atmosphere, and that integrates with DNA and forms a date mark for the cell of a birth. Okay, so this is not an experiment we would want to do again, which have atmospheric nuclear testing and having nuclear stuff floating around in the atmosphere, right? But I'll tell you the bottom line, then I'll show you how they figured this out. What they figured out is looking at people who died a few years ago, that non-neuronal cells are generated. That was found before. Glial cells are made throughout your lifetime as the inference from the finding, but neurons are not generated in adult neocortex. The commentary in this article said, no new neurons for you. Okay, not quite true. We know these two little areas in the brain do it, but not in most of the brain. And they also looked at something called BRDU, which is another way to take a brain, if you have it, that you can, and it marks newly synthesized DNA. So if you have the brain directly to measure, you have a couple of measures of newly synthesized DNA, which will be the marker of new neurons. So here's a fantastically interesting thing. They took people who were born in different times, took post-mortem samples, and measured the carbon-14 relative to what was expected. The line here is relative to what was expected by the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Okay? So that's and here's what they found. If they look for somebody born after 1963, they have in their neurons exactly the amount that you would expect if they made all their neurons around here, and the decrease here didn't affect the neurons at all. The glia are here, which is kind of an average of here and the rest of life. So if you average the average age of the glia, it was about the average age of the life of the person. The carbon was being picked up in the DNA because it's being made, it's being kept and being made. But the neurons all look like one value, the value that has to do with when you're born. All right? So it's not changing the number of neurons that are showing the carbon-14 as if whatever you got at birth, that's it. On the other hand, here's somebody born before 1963 having essentially zero carbon that's showing up in their neuronal DNA and having, again, the expected average glial DNA as if glia kept going. This is fantastic. This is looking at the carbon-14 in the DNA of neurons and glia and people who have passed away and saying the carbon-14 dating looks like neurons, you get them all before you're born, that's it. Glia, you keep making. And they can look at it more directly by looking at this thing that shows you recent DNA, again, showing you impressively that glia keep making new glia with new DNA, but not neurons. So the current conclusion of the field, as far as anybody can tell, is no new neurons for you, except in your dentate gyrus and olfactory bulb. Now,
okay, yeah. Well, there is no real slide where I can stop, right? I think. So anyways, the point here is obviously that there is supposedly no way in which you can keep making neurons, but although that is true so far, the other concept that takes a big role here, or that plays a significant factor when it comes to understanding how different concepts might also apply to your own benefit. It is what, yeah, I don't really have to delve so deep in this one. What is neuroplasticity? Because once again, your brain still holds the capacity of reconnecting different pathways so that you can optimize the different knowledge that you hold. Because even if the limited amount of things that you can hold is a certain way, you can always try to adapt yourself so that you don't find that no more knowledge can be held related to a certain topic. Because something that we have so far found out properly is that even singular neurons can take almost entire memories, if it is possible to understand or to picture. So now, when you picture that one thing as also that we have billions of neurons in our brain, we might as well be dealing with a machine that if it were to be fully exploited, we can incredibly expand ourselves to the amount of memories that can be held, and the amount of things that can be remembered all so well that they do, without even a moment of failure, give us ways to now also integrate these new things into play. So even if you are old, even if you are 70 years old, even if you are 99 years old, even if you are 200 years old, you can keep fitting things. But the problem is, this is an active thing that you do, and this is an active role that you take when trying to integrate memories. Not that, wow, you put some, or you experience something and it gets automatically adjusted. If it doesn't make sense to you, you will be probably discarding something else for that new memory after a certain point in your life. But anyways, yeah, it was kind of understandable. So yeah, we can simply continue.
Except in your dentate gyrus and olfactory bulb. Now, here's something fantastic, though. It appears that exercise, I'll just show you one example in animals and humans. There's other things. Exercise will pump up the number of new neurons you make in the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus. And we know the hippocampus is important for memory, so that's not a bad place to make new neurons. So you know that going to exercise, will strengthen you in various ways, but you never realized, unless you follow this line of work, that when you exercise, you're enhancing the number of new neurons that you're producing in your dentate gyrus. So here's a couple of ways people have approached this. So one way is to measure cerebral blood volume, how much blood is in the dentate. And I'm going to show you evidence that mice that are allowed to exercise push up the blood volume. And that seems to go with direct evidence of neurogenesis, because you can do that in the animals. You can look at sacrificed animals. And then in humans, some indirect evidence that exercise is, again, pushing up the blood volume in the dentate and pushing up a little bit memory abilities that go with that part of the brain. We can't go in and measure neurons in the humans. So here are mice who exercised or didn't exercise. They measure the blood volume. Here in red is the dentate part of the hippocampus. You can see it's the hottest spot for blood volume. And it's the only spot that responds to exercise. So they had some mice not get to exercise, some mice get to exercise. The blood volume increases within the hippocampus selectively in a small component of the hippocampus, the dentate gyrus. Exercise is pushing up the blood volume. Now, that's not direct evidence about what's happening at the cellular level, but they can sacrifice these animals and show you that if they look at this binding that goes with new neurons, with new DNA, that's pushed up in the exercise animals. Here's the statistics. Here's the picture. Okay? So in the animals, they can relate directly or correlate directly. More blood volume and more new neurons going with more physical exercise. In humans, they can measure the blood volume, and so they had some people do more exercise, some people less exercise. Against the dentate gyrus selectively, it showed an increase in blood volume in humans. And now they give them a memory test, and it's not overwhelming, but at least in some cases, the people who did exercising, who pushed up their blood volume, also pushed up a little bit their memory performance. So in humans, it has to be more indirect, but all the data align with the idea that exercise is pushing up neuronal genesis, creation of new neurons, in one of the two regions that everybody agrees we make new neurons, the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus. So, but cells have to go incredible distance.
I mean, okay. I think I remember hearing about something of this sort, but once again, revisiting this concept in particular is useful, because I wouldn't have considered that it was directly related to how neurons are being created and such, and how it plays a role in. I mean, I supposedly knew about memory and such, but yeah, anyways, the whole idea itself is pretty appealing because you can see correlations in which you can also try to take an active role as somebody who wants to test, supposedly, if this is true. Think that so far seems fully correct, and that is that the more you do exercise, the more you get to experience what is a better capacity to remember things and to create new memories and to once again associate new concepts inside of your mind. And even if this is by itself interesting, it also has a side to it that you can pretty much pay attention to, and that is, yeah, kind of a counter argument. Not only by doing physical exercise, you might be incredibly the blood being pumped to the brain, but also doing exercise directly correlates with your emotional state and with how you are feeling when it comes to sensations going throughout your body. You almost are also inducing throughout, if it is intense enough, you're increasing even the pain thresholds that you used to have earlier, because you learn how unthreatening some situations that you before thought were bad now do really are, or do really hold in reality. So there are a lot of different things playing a role when it comes to exercising yourself, therefore seeing benefits out of it. It isn't that simply by exercising you increase blood pumping to the head or to the brain, therefore you now gain the capacity of not feeling anything. like what you felt before and becoming better. It also has some sides rather interesting, man. Um, but I mean, even the counter arguments don't really make it not be so solid. It is simply other justifying reasons as to why it happens. That a physical activity directly correlates with a better brain performance overall. I mean, not even physical activity, something as simpler as breathing exercises do interact with the brain in a way in which, if by reducing, I don't remember this time around, I think it was carbon dioxide stored in the brain, something like that, by properly learning how to have a better, more diaphragmatic, I think it is called, air type of breathing technique, you get to also see that your mental clarity is increased. Therefore, a lot of your different mental functions are affected literally because you simply change how you breathe and such. So, once again, this is pretty important. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's that, I guess. Yeah, we're going to do the next one, and after that, I will have to take a tiny idle break. But we will see what this one is about before leaving.
Instances of the cellular size, neurons have to travel to the intended location. Migration occurs over many months, including 8 months postnatally. Here's this neuron following its little path to where it's going to go. These glial tracks following molecular cues as to their ultimate target location to get organized. Its initial destination and function are predetermined at the start of migration. People can measure things in these that tell you where this is going to end up. It's programmed in these cells that unless there's something that blocks them, that they know where they're going to go and make up different parts of the brain. And then they form synapses, right? The part of where information is sent from one neuron to another. It occurs throughout the brain, but at different rates in different areas. So very early, you see it in spinal cord. Very late, you see it in higher cortical areas like prefrontal cortex. At the peak growth, there's an estimate, these are all gross estimates, that you may be forming 1.8 million synapses per second. It's stunning, right? 1.8 million synapses per second. And do you know how many molecules are in an average synapse by current estimations? 1,000. There's 1,000 different molecules in a synapse for it to do what it has to do. Multiply that times 1.8 million per second. It's spectacular biology. And then they keep getting more and more until 2 years, and then you start to lose them. By age 16, you'll have lost a lot of them. And so the people have this idea we mentioned before, that pruning and selection, that we overgrow the number of neurons, the number of connections. What stays is activity dependence, or just use it or lose it, neural Darwinism. Here's something amazing. There's an estimate that we lose 20 billion synapses per day through adolescence. And that's not a bad thing. Okay, that's not the worst behaving adolescents doing the worst things they can do. That's the brain getting rid of connections that aren't useful. It's an incredibly interesting way to construct a powerful brain, is to get everybody, you can build way overbuild, right? And then eliminate the ones that aren't powerfully useful. And another marker of development.
Yeah, I mean, okay. This is pretty much what we discussed before. That certainly the brain doesn't simply overconstruct stuff for the sake of it. It does as much as it can to be prepared for different situations in which it might find itself in. So by doing so, it leaves the opportunity for you to do as many things as you want and to experience as many things as you wish to, so that it can later on understand what is needed and what can get extracted out of the equation. And in this case, the synapses themselves might seem important, but they don't truly take into account that the memories and the different knowledges that you hold about different situations is more important than just being good at something or not. If you can't really focus on something, and if you can't really even more be capable of naming things for what they are and giving concepts a proper shape in your head, no matter how many billions and trillions of synapses you can create, you're no way going to be capable of learning anything at all. Even if nowadays we have also this whole neurosis almost for, wow, you are still having an incredibly big synaptic creation every single day that you wake up, and every single moment that you are alive. And until you die, you are still having synapses going inside of your brain. No. It is important, but at the same time, it isn't as incredibly spectacular as we make it seem. But yeah, that is the short version of this. Now, as I said, excuse me, but I need a short break. So give me like I don't know, probably one 1 minute or so. I'll be back. I am back. It happened. I came back. I am sadly not gone yet. ah, anyways, I am changing my bad. Thank you. There it is. Okay, as I said, yeah, here we are. So, I took a tiny stretch. Also, please remember to stretch. I mean, nice thing to not be so uh, cracked, let's say, or so in a bad position, simply. Anyways, continuing. Let me take water.
And another marker of development is myelination. That's the growth of the fatty sheath that surrounds neurons that are extending distances. It insulates them and accelerates their signal. It looks like white matter in the postmortem brain. What happens through adolescence, here's age 4 to 22, is that white matter goes up and gray matter goes down. So quite interestingly, the total brain size from about age 6 to about 20, young adulthood, most of you, stays about the same, the total brain size. What you're doing is you're getting rid of gray matter, and you're enhancing white matter. You're getting rid of the neurons that are non-productive and the synapses that are non-productive, and you're increasing the strength with which different parts of the brain can communicate with one another through the white matter. Mm-hmm. And so here's the kinds of pictures of this growth, and some of the parts of the brain that mature latest by these kinds of measures of getting rid of the overgrowth are in prefrontal cortex, and we've talked about that before. So people are interested always in thinking about developmental issues in the biology of them. And here's a kind of a stunning finding. We don't know exactly how it would relate to humans, but I thought it'd be interesting to share with you and think about this just a little bit. So the title of the paper in Science was Good Memories of Bad Events in Infancy. So we know from before, and just every common sense, that fear is important for the survival, right? So we studied the amygdala, which seems essential for learning what's to be feared. Because what's to be feared is what injures you or, worst case, could kill you. So the amygdala is essential for learned fear. And we know that one example of fear conditioning that depends on the amygdala would be a neutral stimulus like an odor, an odor that's not particularly good or bad, just an odor, and then a shock that makes an aversive stimulus. So you pair them through conditioning, odor, shock, so the odor predicts the shock. Now, they looked at young rats and looked at attachment, and here's what they find kind of remarkably. Up to postnatal day 9 for these rats, if they are exposed to the odors and the shocks, here's what they do. They know through pairings, odor, shock, right? Here comes the odor, here comes the shock. They still approach the odors. That's what's in this graph. Up to 9 days, the mice, are still approaching this odor, even though it will lead to a shock. But on the 10th day, just one day later, it completely reverses, and they avoid the odors that predict a shock. A complete reversal. So they keep going to the odors with the shock, and on the 10th day, the pups stop going there. And what they also find is this. If they look at metabolic activity in the amygdala, for the 9-day-olds, it's the same for the odor and the shock, or a neutral odor. It's not selective to what's to be feared. And the 10-day-old, here's a big response in the amygdala for the odor that predicts the shock, for the fearful learning, to know what's scary and injurious and dangerous. So how do people think about this? Well, this is an animal experiment up to 9 days. We can't really know how it relates to people. But the speculation was this, and maybe there's something to it on a different scale in people. Why would an animal approach something injurious up to the amygdala seems to get more mature, and then avoid what's injurious? Why would that happen in such a predictable, evolutionary determined way? And the hypothesis is this, that if you're a very helpless newborn, you have to go to things no matter what, okay? Because you're so dependent on things in your environment to survive. But at some moment, you're mature enough that you say, no, thank you. If it's going to be shocking and painful, I'm going to avoid it, okay? You become kind of independent in that sense, in a concrete sense. And so the author said, well, so could it be helpful for newborns to know no matter what, approach a caregiver, not respond to things that are negative because you need the care because you're so dependent. And now this is super speculatively. A thing that's been noted is that even in families where there's unfortunate, tremendous abuse for a young child, the abuse victims so commonly remain powerfully loyal to their parent. Is this kind of a mechanism that mixes up attachment and fear, all right, especially when you're young and can't separate them out so well? So it's a huge leap from the mice to the people, but it's a mechanism that we can understand might be involved in how attachment and fear can have unusual relationships with one another. All right.
I mean, I don't know if we can really, or not if we can, if it will be in any way useful to really delve with these ideas or not. Because all of the speculation itself you can make sense out of, but the rest doesn't really necessarily need to be taken into consideration, even less with these conditions. Because what you're observing here is certainly that somebody, in these cases, can learn to keep going back to something or not. And even more, as it was said, throughout the speculations you can guess why. Although we supposedly understand these patterns, we don't really get to define how all of this work and such similar things happen in our life or not. But here is where more speculation also comes into play, and that is, do we really know if, for example, what might happen is not related to the fact that you can't really detach yourself from those hurtful experiences in the case of abuse, as it was mentioned here, because you also know that you not only you need to be part of them, you also, not that you know, sorry, you are going through experiences that are reinforcing that in some other way these people are good to you, because certainly you are being abused, or yeah, you're suffering violations of yourself in different manners through some forms, but through the other ones that you see no harm being dealt on, you might as well not believe that everything is so negative about them. And unless you can somehow rationalize something even more when you are so young about such events, and believe that what you are going through is really negative, there is no way for you to realize that those negative things might as well be more negative than what they seem to you in the short run. even more, I mean, a child doesn't have doesn't hold the capacity of projecting 50 years into the future, or or anything like that. So you can't expect them to, out of nowhere, be capable of noticing how damaging it will be for them to keep being abused and keep being, once again, going through damaging experiences. So that is one thing. The other one is also obviously what was kind of proposed there. You would learn to justify things that seem to be negative when you're even more a rational being, because you want to ensure your existence and you want to keep making sure that you are still going to be part of this world. You wouldn't in any manner try out of nowhere to disappear from this world or from wherever else, because now you simply forgot or didn't take into account that you needed to do X or Y or whatever other thing you simply wanted to say. Um, you you always need to have a reason behind the events that are going through your life, and if you can make them sense, you can make them make sense by simply saying that those things are needed for you to keep being part of this world once again. You're not going to see those events as such a negative thing until you learn that it isn't necessary for you to go through them once again. Um, it isn't a sense of learn hopelessness concept that is kind of similar, but it is rather a sense of learn survival. And you can't get rid of the moments of pressure and of the moments of scarcity if you have before experienced that they always end, and then after that you keep having quote unquote a good life. But yeah, I once again, I don't know. This is full speculation. It is not something so easy to predict. I feel like so. Continuing, anyways.
You can't avoid reading in the newspapers or seeing on your computer screen discussions about the deficit and older people like me demanding a lot of medical care that's paid for by the wages you're going to get in a couple of years, right? Okay, all right. I mean, that's how I look at it. Okay, so all right. I mean, all right. So you are entering a world. We're all entering a world where the changing ages, the demography of our society is spectacular. Japan is ahead of us in this a little bit. The rest of the world is following, and China is going to be unbelievable when it happens on scale. But the United States right now, okay, right now. And here's why. For most of human history, the average life expectancy was up to 20 years old. That's why you had to be an adult, right? Because at 20, you go like, who knows how much time I have, right? Better do my adult things, right? And it wasn't that some people lived for a long time. This is really interesting. It wasn't that everybody perished by 30. It was that some people lived to 60, 70, 80, 90, but many people fell ill to many diseases that are now readily cured. So the average age was 20. 1800s, it became the 30s. It's, just a couple hundred years ago in all of human history. By 2000, the average person in the US lived till 77. By 2010, 78. So we're having a spectacular growth in the proportion of humans in our society who are living a long, long time, which is a wonderful thing, right? Okay, but it's radically changing the world we live in and the world for those people who are older as well. So, for example, 100-year-old people, there's 50,000 of them in the US, which is triple what there was time ago, and it's expected to be 1 million people in the US who are 100 years and older by 2050, which is in your lifetime, okay? 1 million people in the US alone who will be 100 or older. And maybe 50% of girls born in 2000 will live for a century, all right? Spectacular changes are occurring right this moment, okay? The baby boom generation, huge numbers of us are approaching, retirement and the kind of medical support that gets heavier when you get older on average. Huge numbers of us. How is it changing? One way it's changing is that families often have, and you might hear this issue of families feeling their sandwich generation. They're taking care of their children and their elderly. And you can bet if you have parents who are living to 120, you're doing that, okay? All right? Giant effects on education, pension, work, financial markets. I mean, these are epic societal effects. So you're hearing the discussion now about how the US is going to deal with this. So there used to be kind of an old model, and even this is not that old. This is from the mid-1950s, where your job was to go to college, have a career, have a mate, take care of a kid, retire at 65, and put your feet up on the desk, right? But all of a sudden, if everybody's living, not everybody, but huge numbers of people are living till 70, 80, 90, 100, many in pretty good health, not everybody we wish for, but many in pretty good health, that's a fantastically different thing. 65 is no longer the retirement moment, and you're glad you made it. 65 is something like the halfway point of your potential work life. right? 20 to 60, 60 to 100, something like this, right? Okay? I mean, it's an unbelievable change. You cannot overestimate how it's changing the world around you and how it will affect the economics and politics of the world that the rest of us will be in you for many years. There's about 10% of the population over 65 now. In 20 years, 1 out of every 4 people will be over 65 by current estimates. Right? So we're going to elect whatever president we want, okay? Right? And older people go vote a lot more than younger people. You can change that, but that's how it is.
Yeah. Oh man. There is this beautiful concept mentioned here that is, oh wow, it seems we are pushing people, the newer generations, to keep working, the older ones. And it seems this guy in particular is interested in keeping working or something like that. I don't know, man. It doesn't seem like he's so disencouraged to know that he will have to keep working or to. I take it as voluntarily having to keep working until he's like 75, but I wouldn't want. Anyways, the point itself, yeah, we are we are incredibly making sure that we're existing for longer, and not only that, we're creating, and that is one of the best ways to observe how rapidly humanity always evolves, because we have in the last 5 to 10 years come up with different solutions and different ways to analyze and measurements to take when it comes to health related issues and to help a statistic that nowadays we have so many capacities to see and to observe and to once again take note of these different parts that we can ensure by properly giving ourselves the chance of observing and once again understanding those measurements, what things we still need to improve on. And it is a very standard way to say, wow, we're simply conducting studies, but it happens that nowadays we have more people advocated towards running them, and we have also more people capable of understanding them, and even more we have an even bigger field of people analyzing and measuring and contrasting information and such, so that we can always keep seeing and projecting and exploring and developing ways in which humanity might be yeah, the human average expectancy life expectancy, sorry, might be extended, and throughout humanity, at least so far, there has been no highest point than this one. So we don't know how much we can discover about this. Supposedly, we have also, this is a different kind of story. We have discovered that there are some different types of cancer that are going to be unavoidable and such, that supposedly there is a limit as to how much the human can live if there is no immortality found later on, because at 150, all of your cells on your prostate will end up unavoidably, or at the very least one by that point, giving you cancer so that you can avoid it and such. We don't know that yet. We are not on that point in time, so we don't know how much of a reality it is, that one thing or not. But the rest is all true. The rest is that we are going to keep, I guess, evolving when it comes to that sense, and keep finding how much longer we can also keep living. But yeah, that's that. I guess. So yeah, we can continue.
So let's talk about adult development. I can tell you that if you compare adult development, very little is understood from 20 to 80. Almost all the research is taking something like college students and something like 80-year-olds and comparing them. So this is pretty much minimal information is available about everything between 20 and 80, but we'll look at what we can. And one of the things we'll talk about for a moment is the 2 kinds of studies we can look at for development. This could be about infants, but we're going to talk about adults. Cross-sectional versus longitudinal. So cross-sectional is, I look at you as 20-year-olds, I look at some 80-year-olds in the Boston community, compare them. That's very different than looking at you at 20 and seeing you at 80, right? Because that's much more controlled. That's you with everything that's special and particular about you at 20 and 80. When you go get people who are 20-year-olds from one place and 80-year-olds from another, cross-sectional study, that's going to have all the differences that go with those cohorts. So what do we see in these kinds of things? Sorry. So here's some measures. You've seen this kind of stuff before. For things like working memory, speed of processing, long-term memory, here's people in their 20s, people in their 80s, a ski slope of decline. Here's things like knowledge of vocabulary, and that stays more steady. So the crystallized fluid distinction you've already heard about before. So what are the strengths and limitations of cross-sectional versus longitudinal studies? So for cross-sectional studies, they're fast. If you're a scientist, like a graduate student who has to do a PhD thesis in the mere 6 or 7 years, okay, you can go do an experiment with 20-year-olds and 80-year-olds and have a conclusion. If you're a graduate student who would have to test this class at 20 and come back to you in 60 years from now and see how you're doing, all right, it's going to be slow progress, okay? So that's why the overwhelming amount of evidence is cross-sectional. The problem with it is cohort effects. We discussed, for example, that IQ scores go up year by year throughout the world. So you're not really comparing equal things in terms of educational opportunities, nutrition, exposure to information on the internet. A 20-year-old and an 80-year-old have lived through different worlds. So it's all mixed up in the measurement. It's not just age, it's different worlds that people have lived in. Longitudinal studies are painfully slow. They're more accurate because you're looking at change within a person. You're holding all the world things constant. You have one other weird thing, which is you get practice effects. If you test somebody in the same test, not if 60 years apart, you don't get much, but if maybe 3 or 4 years apart, you take a test twice, you get better at it. So that's a problem with longitudinal effects where you retest somebody. So there's been a few studies that have looked at relatively short-term longitudinal and cross-sectional data. And here's the ski slope on the values of fluid intelligence things. And it's just made a bit milder by a longitudinal design, but not dramatically different. So it's not the case of longitudinal studies. People used to think, oh, these longitudinal studies are overestimating that. Especially if you're older, you like that thought. You know, it's a messed up study approach. But unfortunately, cross-sectional ones just diminish the difference a little bit. So people have said, though, there's an interesting trade-off. What's a trade-off, then, and I'll ask you for a moment, between most of you are like 18 to 22, so, you know, I'll bracket it 17 to 25, right? Most of you, is that fair? Okay. Okay. What advantage do you have versus somebody in their mid-50s like me? And what disadvantage do you have in some global sense? Oh, that was painful. Yes. Yeah. The answer was, you guys are physically able. Okay, all right. That would be true. Okay? Yeah, there's not many Olympian sprinters who are in their mid-50s, right? Okay. All right. So how about in terms of cognitive things? So we just said, for speed of mental processing, it's good to be 20. And then 30-year-olds are a little slower, 40-year-olds a little slower, 50, 60, 70, okay? Every decade a little bit slower for speed of mental processing. But there's one thing that's an advantage with time for cognition. What's the advantage? Sorry? Experience. Thank you. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. You get to, over time, you learn stuff, especially stuff that you're exposed to a lot, right? So time is a trade-off within adulthood. You lose some speeded capacities. You gain some specific knowledge or experience. And so they looked at studies like these, air traffic controllers in Canada, and this is very relevant because people are constantly thinking about what, especially now, air traffic controllers are in the news more than they want to be, right? Right? You've seen them, unfortunately, they're napping, they're playing movies, some of them. I'm sure it's a tiny minority, but worrisome if you're a member of the flying public. Okay. So here's another question. At what age should you tell somebody, well, I think we don't need you to be an air controller anymore because you're not with it enough for us to feel safe. Right? So people are probing this all the time. So, the average retirement age in the US is 55, in Canada 65. Is one more correct than the other? And so here's what they found when they looked at air traffic controllers. Age influenced processing speed, but not task performance. So what we're thinking is, but older people aren't better, but they're not worse. Maybe there's a trade-off between speed and experience, and it kind of evens out until some age where it will no longer even out. 118 pilots, 40 to 69, took place in flight simulators, tested 3 times across 3 years. So longitudinal design in a flight simulator. The older pilots were worse the first time they did it. Now some time is passing, but then they outperformed the younger pilots in years 2 and 3. That is, once they had some experience with the new situation, they could apply presumably their prior experience. But the very first time they did it, when they have to use their fluid intelligence to figure out what's going on, they were worse. So you can see some trade-offs between raw processing speed and flexibility that goes with young adulthood and some degree of knowledge and expertise that's gained over time. And so trade-offs on these things. How about in memory? Declarative memory that we talked about, everyday memory. I'll show you in a moment. There's
Okay. I think over here we can make a stop because certainly it is noticeable that, or well, not certainly. It is a good point what is being made here, sorry. And what you take into account finally, or trying to take the most important notion is a lot of things always increase in performance throughout life. The more you perform them, and the more you give yourself the capacity of consistently doing them, not only having this to deal with what is your senses, but also what is your knowledge about said task. And this is probably one of the most complex ideas or most observable results when you are dealing with something of the, what is the word, physical, no, yeah, artistical sense. When something is more related to arts, you can see how much throughout years and decades somebody becomes better at such thing because their different cognitions about this one task is utterly increased by simply performing it and understanding it more. There are a lot of fields in life in which we can't perform faster, and that's the only way in which you can become better. There are a lot of other sides and a lot of other concepts that also need to be paid attention and that also beg for the individual to understand them and to observe them and to give them a chance at being fully grasped and being fully admired and even more obviously being fully integrated into something even more complex than before. So in this case, it is only air traffic controllers, but most of the fields in life benefit from those who have more time than those who are younger. That's why also, yeah, short explanation. That is why also more often than not, what's required is age of experience in a job and not simply a being as young as possible. So yeah, that yeah, basically that's all I can say. I guess it is, if you have never thought about it, it's surprising, but in reality, the more you observe different fields, you can always notice that the ones who are in the lead are not the youngest, commonly, and even in those who are the youngest. Wait, what? There it is. Tell you que a mí me gusta la Pepsi. Welcome, guys. Welcome. Um, I thank you for the ride, man. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you had a nice stream. If you want to tell us what happened, please do tell me. And if not, at the very least, know that thanks, and please take care of yourself. Hydrate, take a rest if it is what you need. Whatever. Thank you, man. Thank you. So yeah, here you are. You are simply observing this lecture, and I was particularly talking about right now um, this concept of how performance is more related to experience than simply, yeah, random and completely out of nowhere ability because you are younger. And I was trying to explain that, yeah, I was in the part of something also very noticeable is that even in those who are supposedly younger, you do get to observe how simply being young isn't that important, because what also plays a big role is how much these people do have or really are um, already accustomed with said things. As in, you notice that these people have already gone through a lot of experience, even if they are young. And I I can't avoid giving this one example. Sorry if there is something better that I can say, but I can only come up with this one. A lot of the young generations of esports, famous young players, are not randomly created. They have already been given a lot of knowledge and a lot of different notions and a lot of experience throughout heritage and throughout their family and such. As in, uh, yeah, a big part of the Face clan was not brought out of nowhere. They already had family who played and such, or the later generations of Face and such. So yeah, that is what I wanted to say here. That the evidence is always expertise and knowledge is more beneficial than anything else. So yeah, That, I guess. And once again, thank you, Kay. Now, let us continue. I guess.
How about in memory? Declarative memory that we talked about, everyday memory. I'll show you in a moment. There's mild, steady decline in healthy aging, severe in Alzheimer's. Implicit memory, we talked about that, can be more steady across ages, but let me focus on explicit memory, declarative memory. We're going to figure out why the projector is washing these things out so much. But here's a slide that you don't have to see very much to know. Long-term memory's performance is going down, quite sharply year by year as you get older. But here's something that was a huge surprise from brain imaging, a huge surprise, and the thing that if you didn't have brain imaging, you wouldn't even conceive that it could have existed. So many studies have done brain imaging.
I hope it can be interesting. Just in case, yeah, sorry, my bad. Short explanation. We are on the lecture 18 about adulthood, brain development, and such. That's the explanation for this. If you wanted it, sorry for not saying
perform
it.
various kinds of tasks, memory tasks in this case, with young adults and older adults.
No
and
problem.
what they found unexpectedly was this.
Wait, shut up, you. Once again, thank you, guy. Have a good one, my man. Please take care of yourself once again. Thank you.
That young adults would typically activate one side of the prefrontal cortex, typically in regards to whether it was verbal or spatial. So here's young adults mostly on one side, mostly on one side, mostly on one side, mostly on one side. Healthy older adults in good health characteristically turned on both sides of the brain as they were performing these memory tasks. So you wouldn't have known that if you didn't have imaging, because who could have thought about that, right? So then there was a little bit of a debate in the field, where the fact that adults were turning on both sides of their hemispheres, whereas adults were just picking one or just using one, was that a good thing or a bad thing? So people said, well, it's a bad thing because maybe as you get older, you lose your specializations and you're using the wrong stuff, okay? It's as if I need my physics book and I'm going to grab my chemistry book. Well, just grab your physics book, right? Okay, right? Just grab the right thing. Why are you getting other stuff that's not relevant and could mess you up or slow you down? So some people said, you're sort of losing the specialization of peak young adulthood. You're leaking brain activity in the wrong places. It's yet another sad sign of getting older. Here's an alternative one. Well, you get older, but maybe you get some compensatory mechanisms. You realize at some level in your brain that you can't do what you could when you were 20, and you make up for that by somehow using two sides of your brain instead of one. Does that make sense? So that would be a good thing, right? So how would you decide that? How would you decide whether using the two sides of your brain when you're an older adult is a helpful thing, part of the solution to keeping your cognition going, or is it part of the problem of losing long-term memory abilities as you get older? They're declining. How would you decide that? There's kind of an easy answer. Sorry? You what? Yes, well, yeah, should we split is a suggestion we should take older people, split their brains and see how they're doing? Yeah, right. Well, older people their long-term memory is not that bad. Yeah. So here's the approach. It seems reasonable. They say amongst older people, some people do better and worse in terms of the memory. Does better memory go with using two sides or one side, right? And what was found, here's one example. Here's young people using one side of their frontal cortex as they perform a memory task. Here's older people whose memory was not so good. Here's older people whose memory was good. And here's a similar finding. So the suggestion was that older people who used both frontal cortices were actually doing better. They were having less of an effective age on cognition. So the answer seems to be it's a good thing. And if you're older, you somehow compensate for some of the decrease in long-term ability by applying more neural systems to support your performance. Is it okay? So now, what are some factors that, older adults are...
Yeah, I guess once again, this whole concept of different ways in which you let neuroplasticity play a role in your existence and such is once again proven to be right, because after all, the more you give yourself the capacity or the opportunity of observing and even more of letting all of the different knowledges get integrated into a deeper understanding about what you wish to do, it lets you more and more become better at it. So that's why even if you're supposedly quote unquote compensating, you're simply not that you are. Your brain has deducted in which ways you can now perform this one task better. And by doing so, you can obviously have a better time and have a better opportunity at overall existing always, because it is certainly beneficial for you to not be so much in pain and so much distracted by such things. So yeah, I guess it is as good as it sounds. once again, the experience in this case, not of you, but of the brain and how you work as an individual and such. But yeah, I guess that's that.
Really interested. You are not. In about 30 years, you might be. But older adults are really interested in, what can I do to keep myself going? Since I'm going to live to be 80, 90, or 100 with just a little bit of luck, how can I keep my quality of life high in terms of cognition and mental abilities? So one thing that people have found is that on average, higher education is correlated with, and there's many interpretations of this, better cognitive abilities and less likelihood of getting Alzheimer's, or getting Alzheimer's if you're going to get it at an older age. So that's kind of interesting. That's good to go to college, good to keep being educated in some sense. It doesn't have to be formal, but formal education correlates with that. Now, here was a surprise, and now you tell me what it is. So how would that work? How would sitting there and listening to me really carefully right now give you an extra decade of cognitive ability when you're 80? Okay, all right, now I got your attention. So, I mean, how would that work biologically? Like, is education kind of going in your brain and saying, we're knocking all these things in and keeping them here, and we're not going to let you have any injury when you're 40 or 50? How does that work? Okay, so I'm going to tell you one more piece of information, which is this, and then you tell me what you think. So the other thing that we know is there's evidence that once you get the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, then the more educated you are, the faster you decline. And I don't think the story is all done yet because people are complicated, but this is the current evidence. So how do you interpret that? So here's the interpretation. The interpretation is more education gives you more mental tools, what people will call cognitive reserve. You have more things going for you, like maybe the ability to use two hemispheres. That will protect you as something like some brain injury happens over time, like an Alzheimer's disease or other causes of slowed or diminished cognition in old age. That will help you. You have more tools with which to keep operating successfully. But once Alzheimer's disease becomes severe enough in the brain that those tools are no longer available to you, then the more educated you are, the more you plummet, because everything is done. So we now know something, and I'll just say word by that Alzheimer's disease, and this is compelling evidence for this, starts in your brain about 15 years before you get a diagnosis. And it could be more than that. That's how far we can track it back by brain imaging. So if an adult is diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 70, somewhere around 55, something has started that will ultimately be injury enough to lead to dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And that's why there's such a big emphasis on early identification, because it's very hard to treat a brain that's had a lot of injury. You want to catch the people at 55 or 60. So we also know that lifelong cognitive activity is good. Conscientious, we talked about that. And here again comes exercise, okay?
Okay, I prefer to stop here for a second because the rest is kind of unrelated. We are dealing mostly with what is brain stuff, and we can move into the physical realm later on. But I will guess, if I had to also give it a proper explanation because it didn't happen, that the way in which you structure your brain by keeping yourself constantly learning, therefore what is called here having a higher type of education, is the more you learn, the more you find, or the more, once again, unconsciously, the brain develop ways to comprehend information and to keep it all interconnected and interrelated, so that you can always have the possibility of integrating it into higher and higher forms of understanding, so that you don't get lost into what you supposedly know. And even more, you don't get the possibility of saying that what you went for wasn't truly comprehensible. By doing such things and by keeping yourself always learning, you give, once again, more and more tools to keep interacting with new coming experiences and new coming knowledges that you might want to integrate. So not only you become good at something, but you also set yourself up for success when something newer is going to appear in front of you. And obviously, you also get later on even the possibility of experiencing even more chances of feeling as good as possible, because what you are going through, once again, is the constant renewal of your understanding about how much you do get the capacity of learn something or not. I guess I don't want to make this point that much of a big thing, but I guess also if you learn particularly how to learn and such things, it will also influence how you later on disinvolve yourself in such situations, because after all, knowledge is what holds you capable or back from experiencing once again such things. I don't know. It might be like that, it might not be like that. I don't really get to decide this time around. But that is one thing. The other is why, with Alzheimer's disease, it will be that you decline faster. I guess if I had to give it a reason, I will say, I think it was mentioned that those who are declared with Alzheimer's seem to be performing better than those who don't. But once Alzheimer's disease starts to activate in your brain and you start to lose your capacities, you lose them all and you have a steeper decline. I guess it is declined with because you fear so much the consequences of such sickness, you prepare so much more than the average person. And in this case, not only you are preparing more, but also Alzheimer's disease obviously starts to destroy the different understandings that you have and the different tools that you set up for yourself. So obviously, what you before were capable of doing to gain new knowledge is going to get completely obliterated by the rest of the things and the rest of the experiences that you go through. But yeah, I think it is not that bad, honestly. Not that yeah, sorry, not that Alzheimer's disease isn't bad. The possible explanation given to it, as in, obviously, there are so many factors to take into account with this that you might never get to really tell how Alzheimer's disease takes control of you when it comes to, yeah, to robbing you out of the capacities that you had, sadly. But yeah, that's everything there. Now, onto the physical part.
Um, so, uh, so they took a study. This is now a random assignment study.
We can go back to those stutterings for a second, because also, just in case, obviously, more neuroplasticity once again. I am not going to explain this concept for a fifth time. Neuroplasticity. That's everything I'm going to say. Also, why it is important.
Exercise, okay? So, so they took a study. This is now a random assignment study, finally a full-on experiment, where they took sedentary people who were not exercising over 60, and assigned them to two groups: an aerobic training group who did walking and swimming, so some real exercise, and a non-aerobic group who did toning and stretching. So they thought they were special, they were active, but they weren't doing the aerobic exercise. And they didn't do it a phenomenal amount of time, an hour a day, a few times a week for months. It's not a brutal exercise schedule. What happens? It's kind of amazing what happens. These are healthy people, but not very active. What's shown here in the red bars are the cognitive performances after the exercise of the healthy older people, and blue bars are the people who did the stretching and toning, not the aerobic exercise. So very substantial gains in cognitive abilities from a few months of moderate exercise. And in the brain, both by functional MRI and by structural MRI, in gray matter and white matter, physically measurable changes in the brain for the group that did the aerobic exercise a couple times a week, for a few months, compared to the group that did the sedentary exercise, the less active exercises. That's amazing. Brain changes, cognition changes. Again, no pill you can pop, and you're making new neurons in your dentate gyrus to boot, right? So it's kind of, now all of us want the easy out, but exercise is the most compelling story for keeping your brain optimized that we know. Now here's a remarkable thing. So exercise we kind of get. Actually, if you think about it.
Well, okay. Yeah, this is kind of a different point. So to give also something else that I hope I didn't mention before, just in case. There is another side to exercise that is incredibly attracting when you try to think about why would it be beneficial for the brain, and that is also the moment in which you are capable of entering a mental state in which exercise becomes almost a second nature to you. You also unlock that capacity of being what constantly gets referred as to the zone or mental clarity or a state of trance or whatever you want to define it as. You gain the capacity of being in such a state, and you gain even more the ability to find yourself in such a mental place that you ensure you now get to fully be like that, and you get to fully be in those tracks while occupying yourself with something that requires almost no mental energy. So you can now give yourself the chance of thinking almost completely different from what is your normal day to day when you are not quote unquote in the flow. So that is another good argument as to why exercise is certainly beneficial to you and why it is even more than enough for you to try and perform if you are thinking about why performing and why having exercise be a consistent thing happening to you is minimally worth because it also kind of in what is being the topic here memory increases your mental capacities. So okay, let me try to tie it. If you can resolve things better when you're doing exercise, you might as well want to increase the amount of exercise that you perform because it will lead to a better resolval of the different problems that you find throughout your day. And by doing so, not only do you ensure one new way in which you can keep dealing with the daily life, but also one, yeah, a consequential way to also make sure that your pathways and tools, as we kind of said with Alzheimer's, your tools when it comes to dealing with newer situations and knowledges is also strengthened because you get once more to know and to keep developing what is your whole array of knowledges about this. So this is completely beneficial, but once again, you need to overcome the desire to not even do the minimal amount of exercise, and that is hard. Continuing.
We don't know the mechanism at all, okay? I mean, you're running around like this. Now, how is that pushing up your neurons in your brain? But here's something very psychological that's kind of stunning, and at first I almost didn't believe it when I read it, but there's been a few other studies that have supported this. We often think, well, exercise is something like real. Attitudes, even in psychology, of course, attitudes are just they're just attitudes, okay? So look at this and then you can think about this. So they looked in a longitudinal study of 400 people, over 400 in the Baltimore longitudinal study of aging. They started under 50, but they've kept going with them. They gave them a questionnaire on attitudes about aging. So they said, are older people, for example, more absent-minded or less intelligent? And some people are, say, oh my gosh, older people are very absent-minded. They're very less intelligent. Other people think it's just a milder thing. People vary in their estimates of how severe these changes are in old age. Then they measured something very concrete and real, the number of cardiovascular events, like stroke or heart attack, over the next 38 years. Okay? So this is a real physical measurement. This is an attitude. How powerful is an attitude? Well, it's kind of stunning, unbelievably powerful. In some ways. We don't know if it's the attitude or something correlated, but here's the percent with cardiac strokes or heart attacks. Here's the people who had negative age stereotypes, and here's the people who had positive age stereotypes. So one always has to be worried about this chicken and egg issue. Maybe if you've had a lot of strokes and heart attacks, you're not so optimistic about your old age, right? But they were measuring these things at the beginning. They were very similar, so they weren't starting out with different health problems. So something about attitudes seems to chip in to the most core aspects of physical health, but none of us understand the mechanism. Yes?
A lot to do with that.
That's a good, so the question is, how about family history? It could be mixed into that, yes. Yep, that's a very good point. Then it's not just attitudes, right? Or it could be not attitudes at all, right? Okay, that's it. So, here.
Okay. I I think this in particular is interesting enough because certainly you have something very interesting to take into consideration here once again, and that is how different optics about situations do affect the way in which you interact with the rest of the world. I think I already kind of discussed, not in this one, but before, this concept in another lecture that if you predispose yourself to find negative things in your life or to find bad moments or to go, not to go to believe that you're going to go through bad things because you presuppose that they are predestined to happen to you, you're only going to find once again negative things. But the main outcome or the main objective of your kind of existence should be not to believe that many bad things are going to happen to you, but rather to try and ensure that what you are going to have is good and will be beneficial for you. So, in that sense, this is another way to prove that the outcomes and outlooks and views and every single type of analysis that you do about a certain matter severely impacts you. And I like this thesis more than anything else. I think when it comes to this side of ideas. So obviously, let me preach a little bit more here. If you can, now that you are still in time, completely swap how you perceive certain things instead of believing that if something, yeah, if X were to happen, the Y consequence is going to be so big that I am going to die, you are going to find yourself dealing with less and less painful moments and less painful occurrences throughout your life because there is no bigger predictor to something that how you perceive it will go. That is what I wanted to say. Yeah. Not fully articulated, sorry. I'm still trying to get it properly crafted into something more capable of being impactful. So, anyways, continuing. Um,
history, it could be mixed into that. Yes.
Attitude about
Yep. That's a very good point.
wow.
Then it's not just attitudes, right? Or it could be not attitudes at all. Okay. So, here's the concept that regardless of your age, but age is one of the most powerful pieces of the story. When your time is limited, people focus on social goals related to emotional meaning and emotional satisfaction, and less related to knowledge acquisition. That depending on the moment of your life on average, you know, when you're in adolescence and you're in college and graduate school and you're beginning your residency or becoming a junior partner in a law firm, you're in an age of huge information acquisition. What you want to know is, what do I need to know to do something important, significant, valuable in my life, right? You're sitting here acquiring knowledge. College is 4 years of acquiring knowledge in terms of classrooms and majors, right? You guys do other things too, but the number one mission is acquire that knowledge. Now, when you get older, you don't really want so much information anymore. Maybe what you're much more interested in is how you regulate your feelings. How positive can you make your life? Not by being adventurous, taking risks, and all this kind of stuff, but by finding a way towards happiness. And I'm going to show you a bunch of research that suggests that young adulthood is full about acquisition of information through adventure. And old age, you regulate you switch, on average, your focus to regulate your emotions in positive ways. And so sometimes people will call that wisdom, although you could just say it's different things for different ages are desirable. And part of this support came from the following result, which has been found many, many, many times, but it was kind of stunning when it was first reported. So this is where people were asked, how happy are you? Are you satisfied with your life? So here's younger adults, 18 to 50, basically. About half of them say they're very satisfied, but it zooms up if you're older. How many people are satisfied with their standard of living? 40 if you're younger, 60 if you're older. Frequency of depression, for example, never, let's pick often, higher for younger people. More frequent thoughts about suicide. By every measure you can make, if we give you a questionnaire like this on average for 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, you report more unhappiness, okay, than older people. On average. Of course, it varies, okay? But that's kind of a surprise maybe, or not, okay? And that's everybody has found that. Not a surprise?
Or something doesn't mean that's the way it is.
Well, we'll come back to this again, yes. Just because you say you're happier doesn't mean you're happier. Yeah, we don't have a better way than that, though, okay? We can't say, oh, you think you're happy, but you'd be so happy if you were at Caltech. You'd be just so happy. This is one of the measures, I'm a brain measurer, so I like objective measures. I think if a person tells you they're happy, they probably are. There are certain moments I know when people tell you that. Well, we'll see, who knows? I agree with you, it's a concern. So here's the thought. The motivation and goals are set by temporal context.
Okay, yeah. We can go back into this. I'm not going to search the particular graph, but it makes pretty much sense that also there is one particular consideration, and that is the more you have time to exist, the more you're having time to observe different situations that you find yourself in, the more you make sense out of the different things that you believe are bad in a certain point, and you can later on rationalize into something less negative, the more you are not only going to quote unquote feel thankful for them, but also you're going to see and you're going to experience how incredibly beneficial it was for you to now overcome these situations and not get so moved by what is only the negative side of that experience that you have to constantly deal with, let's say. And also, there is this side of, as it was described here, simply experience, often kind of misinterpreted as wiseness, and that is also that sometimes, or not sometimes, throughout life, you learn which things are also out of your control. So there are certain things that you are not going to be capable of doing, and there are certain things that you are not going to be capable of in any way achieving or becoming part of. You are only going to get what is kind of right for you and kind of comprehensive for you enough, pinned down, and the rest you're going to let go. You're not going to have so many worries about things that seem to make no sense for you and that should be solved in so many different other ways. When you're younger, you're preoccupied a lot more, and in this particular case, it doesn't get shown, but there is also a big correlation between worriness and the amount of life that you get to live and to experience. And obviously, I mean, age expectancy decreasing with the amount of worriness that you go through, and it doesn't take into account those type of measurements. A lot of times, very young people, because they are unnecessarily worried about so many things and about so many notions and concepts that are fully new to them and that they haven't yet rationalized into something less harmful and less distractful from life itself and from the necessities that they need to fulfill. So yeah, that is also another explanation for this, as to why it seems to happen that with time you stop being so attached to things, I guess, or not attached, you stop being so sad and so cynical about life.
Measures. I think if a person tells you they're happy, they probably are. There's certain moments I know when people tell you, well, we'll see, who knows? I agree with you, it's a concern. So here's the thought. That motivation and goals are set by temporal context, that time is perceived as limited, and all this will come that the older you get, the more you focus on positive things in the world. And what makes you happy is the thought, is to focus on positive things and ignore the negative. So how true might this be experimentally? So they had students, this is really washed out, capture these special moments, the same ad, and this one says, capture the special moments, and this one says, capture the unexplored world. So if you're an information seeker, which is better, the unexplored world or the special moments? Which is better? Unexplored world, right? You're a 20-year-old. Unexplored is awesome. Right? Young people prefer this ad. Older people prefer the special moments. And special moments we mean emotionally satisfying, right? Okay. Here's another one. They show you pictures of a positive and a negative expression. It flashes away and there's a dot left, and you simply put, if the dot appears on the right, you push your right-hand button. If the dot appears on the left, you push the left-hand button. It's simply pushing to a dot. But the dot is in the place where you just saw either a negative or a neutral face. And what they find is, for younger people, they're about as fast, whether the dot appears where the neutral or negative face was, they don't really care. For the older people, they're much faster if the dot appears where the positive face had just been, as if their attention was locked to the positive face. Oh, the dot appears there, I'm ready to go. Lock to the positive face, if the dot appears here, you go, whoa, 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 and you shift your attention, and that takes extra time. So you're locked to the positive when you see a positive and a negative face. Here's another one where you're asked, even positive and negative car options, things that are good or bad about a car. This line goes up, this line goes down. Younger people focus more on the negative options relative to older people who focus more on the positive options. Here's another one. You show pictures of happy scenes or neutral scenes or negative scenes. This is a graveyard. Young people's memory for positive, negative, and neutral things. They remember emotional things better. Let's go to the older people. Look at this line way up here. That's memory for the positive scenes, and here's the negative scenes. You see the focus on the positivity and the sort of lack of interest in the negative stuff? Right? For young people, equally interesting if it's positive or negative. For older people, much more interesting and sticking in your memory if it's positive and not sticking in your memory if it's negative. So one of the big questions is this simply about getting older? And I'm going to ask you to think back, if I can, to your last days in high school. Your last days in high school. For those last days, and I'm sure it will vary depending on your experience in different ways, were you primarily interested in getting that last little bit of information about US history or calculus? I mean, you might have been. That could be the critical bit of information that will make college work out. Or did you have a sudden, and it's kind of embarrassing when you're 16, 17, 18, enhanced sense of nostalgia? Oh, this is the last time that the 3 of us or the 6 of us or the 8 of us or the 2 of us will be together. Then we're spreading across the world to go to different colleges. Nobody had that feeling? Okay, it's kind of embarrassing when you're 18 because you're not supposed to say that kind of stuff, right? And it will happen to you at the end of college, for most of you, most of the time. I remember senior year crept up on us in college, and we started college and go, oh my gosh, this is the last year we're together, and it seemed very emotionally important. Okay. All right, so age or time? So if it's simply age or is it time? So they did experiments where they asked people, are you focusing on adventure and content, or are you focusing on emotion and satisfaction? When you're about to move from one city to another, people wanted to spend time with people they really cared about, and they were not interested in getting new information. Two more sort of tragic studies. If people are near death and they're asked this question, of course, time with people, not acquiring information. But here's another one, inner city gangs, study in Los Angeles. Inner city gangs that are involved in violence. Much more interested in time with people than in information. And partly that goes with what is viewed from the outside, sometimes as kind of the insane loyalty that inner city gang members have for one another. It's because they're so focused, given their situation, on this relations with the other people in their group compared to everything that's rational about a safe, growing up, right? Okay? So it's not, and tragically, that if you ask a member of inner city gangs how long they think they'll live, they often tell you not very long. I'm counting on not living very long, right? So it's not whether you're 20 or 60 or 80, it's how long you sense time is in front of you. A temporal horizon. So here's one study where I had a hand in, where we took older and younger people and put them inside MRI and showed them positive, neutral, and negative pictures. Here's a couple different points. When they said, how intense is this picture? Look at younger people. Positive, neutral, and the negative are really intense. Look at this goes down. So the older people, as they see the pictures experienced by their own report, the negative pictures as being less intense. All right? They're sort of downplaying the negative. And if we ask their memory, here's younger people. Positive and negative things, neutral things, same for positive and negative. Look at older people. Much more focused in memory, retaining in memory the positive and not so much the negative. And if we look in their amygdala, which we know is a structure that's essential for how emotion modulates the formation of memory, here's young people. Here's a positive picture, here's a negative picture, here's a neutral picture. So emotion counts, positive and negative count about the same. Look at older people. Here's positive and here's negative, okay? So this partly addresses the question, like, for some people, like, are older people pretending they're positive? Well, it doesn't look like that, right? This is their amygdala as they're looking at it. I mean, I don't know if their amygdala can pretend to look at the positive, right? So here's the good news for you. What will happen as you get older, on average, is that for whatever reason happens, and we don't really know why, you will focus more and more on the positive things in your life. And you'll feel better for that, on average.
I don't know if this is the place for me to go kind of crazy, no? But I think I have a proper, quote unquote, proper explanation for this idea. But it will take us some time. Let's see. I think the pretty short version is that you learn to be more fond of the positive because you go through more of the bad moments, and you, by doing so, gain the capacity of not wanting more of what was truly negative when you're older. And obviously, when you're younger, you don't gain that one capacity because you have no way almost to obtain or to understand which thing is really bad and which thing is really good. And you're almost, this was used as a very common describing thing, almost a scared lion seeking out every single thing to understand what is going on. So what is negative will impact you more, and what is so positive you can almost ignore. Now, deepening into this, first we start with the older people. I think a proper way to explain it is, once you go through times and once you have the capacity or have in your own, in your sack of experience things, all of the negative moments and all of the negative parts and all of the negative sides that do create what ends up being the actual you, you observe that those things might as well not bring you any benefit. Therefore, you slowly, not that you shield yourself, but that you slowly turn away from what is negative because you have already gone through there and observed what was possible to gain and what was any resemblance of utility lying around. So you learned that it was in no way beneficial for you. You extracted that, and by doing so, you gave yourself the possibility later on of moving on onto something a lot better and more useful. Than that is the positive aspect of life. Because obviously on the counter side, by going to the good side of life, you get to learn which things feel good, and you get to experience and to create a consensus on what is the good and the beneficial side of such an emotion. And this gets more and more replicated through time because once again you stack experience and you stack learned learned moments and past yeah and past times so that you can now say with confidence that what you're observing, if it is positive, is more attracting than if it is negative, because negativity in no way is beneficial to you, so you have no reason to want it or to believe that it was in any way good to have. And once again, you can almost, what it was shown on the, I think, second to last image, you shield off from negativity because you learn that it also brings you no good. And I would also want to introduce a tiny bit of an idea, but I think this is more of a contamination than something else, and that is there might be a secondary aspect to this that is also the unconscious side of the mind, which has learned so much through time, which consequences are found in negativity, as in even more in the modern world, we have a lot of different notions that are around negativity. It harms your life, it harms your body, it harms yourself if it is that you let it take control of your life. It it is negative for your life expectancy, it is negative for your surroundings, it is negative for your overall mental state. It has so many sides of negativity, the negativity itself, that you learn to avoid it as much as you can. So it also becomes a big factor comes into play if you want to make the argument that somehow you understand why you are avoiding it. But that might not be fully true because certainly we don't know how long has this information been circulating around society and such. At least I don't know, so I can't give it a proper measurement as to oh yeah, all of these ideas that are floating on the collective unconscious mind might also play a role or not. That is the older people. On the younger side, once again, it happens that when you are so young, you might want to go through what seems dangerous to learn how much of a danger there really is and how much of a threat there really appears to be, because you can't measure what you don't comprehend and you can't gain knowledge from what you don't experience yourself fully. So, by giving yourself the chance of, in this case, being part and experiencing and taking or paying more attention to what is negative, you get the possibility of extracting the lessons that later on you utilize to learn that there is nothing more to extract, basically. And in a contrast, it also happens that what is happy becomes simply a reassuring point for you that the negativity, I, I think it is getting too abstract, but somehow that the negativity will not take a hold of you because there are still good things happening around you, and those are good things simply show to you that you are doing well, and those good things simply show to you that there is always a possibility of once again finding that said happiness or promised happiness, but that isn't something that you pay attention to because certainly once again you don't need it in any way. So I think it is something along those lines. I don't know. This is completely completely manifested schizophrenia in this case. So yeah, if it makes no sense, you can pay no attention to it at all. Continuing.
So that's a kind of quiet satisfaction. Oh, I'm focusing on the positive. That's the Zen satisfaction. Let's talk about fantastic satisfaction, the reward system, right? When you really want to do something, because it's really wonderful, it's going to feel so wonderful, the reward system. Let me tell you a little bit about what we understand about that. It involves dopamine. It's a critical neurotransmitter. Starts in the ventral tegmental area of your brainstem, and that projects to something called the nucleus accumbens, an inferior portion of the basal ganglia. And this is reward central. If you love something from opera to chocolate to video games, this turns on. Every experiment that people have ever done shows in humans, if something really turns you on, this area really gets turned on, all right? I mean, what's more powerful for us than what we find deeply emotionally rewarding? This is that reward system. And the dopamine runs from there, and look at how cells respond. So I'm going to show you an example from monkeys where we could look at single cells and then brain imaging back to people. So here's the experiment with monkeys. And there's a message in this that's both biologically true and I think compelling about human life, right? So biologically true as a science and compelling about life as a story, right? So here's the experiment. The monkey sits there and gets various cues, different visual things that tell them what's coming up. Let's pretend this is a cue that something wonderful is coming up, highly desired food, right? So they're recording electrically while the animal sees this. There's waiting for it, what we can call the anticipation period. And now here comes the reward. And here's something sort of deep, I think, about reward and learning and people and things like this. So here's the neurons firing. This is the sum of the neurons firing in the ventral tegmental area. So right now, they're just sitting there, and whoops, here comes the reward. Here's R, and boom, dopamine is released, okay? The dopaminergic cells are firing like crazy. They're getting food they really want. We're thrilled. We're hungry, and we're getting something delicious. Not much more rewarding than can happen when you're really hungry, okay? Now they predict the arrival with the cue that you saw, a meaningless stimulus. And look what happens. When do these neurons fire? Not for the food arriving, but for the visual signal that predicts the food will come. What's delicious for the brain is the anticipation of something that's rewarding. And this morning when I was thinking about this lecture, I was thinking, in my life, almost always, I mean, you might tell us, think about experiences you've had that you look forward to. And almost the most delicious part, you might say, is the anticipation of something delightful. Often the event itself is more mixed and post-climatic, anticlimactic than you would have thought. Is that fair? Okay. I mean, I think there's nothing better than like, I'm anticipating something wonderful. And the event can be wonderful, but often it's a little more complicated, right? That anticipation is like pure joy because your dopaminergic system is firing freely away. And it protests also. So you get the visual signal that, oh, the reward's coming up, okay? Here it is. Here comes the food. The food doesn't come. Look at the silence. These cells are protesting, because they didn't get what they expected to get, okay? So it's very compelling that the reward in you occurs not even so much for the reward itself, but the anticipation of the reward is where it's biologically occurring when you can anticipate and count on it correctly.
Well, okay. I wanted to respond to what you said. Yeah. To a certain extent. Okay. What you're saying is true, Olga. Sugar, for example, does trigger in your brain almost the same pathways that drugs do. And that is certainly because, to a certain extent, they are drugs. The different responses that these type of substances induce in your body are related or closely related to other types of substances, as in the sugar, for example. Sugar induces an increased heartbeat because it triggers a signal in the brain to activate and to accelerate blood flow. So it also is an stimulant, even if you are not classifying it as a drug, because let's say that you are not taking enough of it to fully be under the influence of something. It is a drug in that sense. Sugar in particular, is a weird, not so serious drug. In other types of food, it is more weirder, yes, that you find out that they have, let me say like this, they have responses in you that you don't really expect. I mean, when you eat something supposedly, something that falls under the umami category, you get a certain pathway in your brain activated, and that is the sensation that consistently you find almost behind your cheekbones or in the posterior area of your jaw. That is one sensation that also some drugs produce, and that is once again something very stimulant to the brain. Yes, those we don't really have an explanation, but later on, I mean, you also name achievements and doing stuff. Many times when you expect something, what you feel after the completion of such a goal is the pleasure accumulated from the amount of stress created by trying to achieve that goal. Let's say a very simple example, I think. It is if you play a lot of League or if you play a lot of Dota, the anticipation of the win is almost as equal as a yeah as a what is as a shot of something very very tasty supposedly for you because you had been wishing for that to happen for so long that now you get to reap those rewards and now you get to finally have what you wanted for so long and what you works yourself so much and even more if you really achieve the the achievement itself, you get to release the whole stress that was related to not getting what you have been working yourself with. Um, it is crazy. I mean, yeah, even social interactions, if they are something that you lack, acting your brain and in your body very intensely, and yeah, dopamine, if it is released for long enough, extended and consistent periods of time, gets slowly less and less effective. That is why also a lot of people does seek out more and more bigger hits, but I mean that is pretty understandable, I guess. um, oh yeah, I understand the point. Yeah, every single thing that you do consistently enough gets reduced, and sadly, if you don't pay attention to this one factor, you will only give way to what ends up becoming later on an addiction. The way the way in which you can avoid that is by having different um, gratifying experiences happening to you, or to be somewhat capable of limiting yourself from going through such things. But it isn't that easy because even the most this disciplined human fails to do so. So it is kind of risky to believe that we are going as individuals to be capable of holding our wishes back to do something. Um, and yeah, limiting and balancing is always the key in these things, but it isn't easy. Once again, and even more, I mean, in this whole discussion, it feels so good. How can you remove from yourself the capacity of feeling so good? I mean, yeah, there is one thing that you didn't mention that also feels incredibly good, and that is incredibly easy to get addicted to. But the more you do it, the more you crave for that sensation and that one feeling that can only get produced after so much of the quote unquote workout for that excitement that is the final reward. And once again, it is impossible to limit yourself sometimes. That is why distracting yourself is better than to believing, let's say, that you are somehow capable of not having that um, going all in. Well, yeah. Also, that is true. If you go too much into something, you lose the capacity of feeling good because of it. Because when you go too deep into something that supposedly felt good for you, you start directly removing the achievement part, and you are only pursuing or finding yourself in the exertion part of the process. So that is why, mm, as you say, you stop getting the release of dopamine and the release of the happiness produced or the excitement and overall mood betterment produced by such experiences. But yeah, it is like that. uh, so let me drink some water. But well, yes, basically, yes to everything that you said. I think if I didn't forget something, I hope. Um, let me. Yeah. I forgot something. So yes, so far, yes, perfectly fine. Um, I I seem to know what you know, and you seem to know what I know. Nice. But I forgot what was the last point. So give me a second, because I also got. Yeah, okay, okay, yes, yes. Also, this one in particular was more about the anticipation being the reward itself, and that is, let's say, I was thinking about an example here because it is talking about dopamine and how you feel good when you get the rewards that you have been wishing for. And I think a good example will be I can come up with another one, but if you're playing football and if your team made 5 goals against the other one that only made one, the anticipation that comes with the last 5 minutes and the happiness felt from those 5 minutes is as equal or bigger than the moment in which the win is fully declared, because those moments always can, let's say, um, ensure that you get what you have been wishing for and are the final steps to securing that what, once again, you have been striving for is in your hands already. You simply need to wait. In this case, the banana, it was a banana that I think it isn't racist, I hope. But the food that the monkeys got wasn't as as exciting as knowing that the light which anticipated the food was already shown to them. So yeah, this one also makes pretty much sense when you see it from that perspective, I think. And now let me see what you said. I was. I, I, I get the first part of what you're saying, but I don't really get the second one as to how is the reward. Yeah, the rewarding system is an example of something laggy between our software. What is it that you will be referring to in that part? I mean, I get the first one, yeah. After all, it is always, at least from my perspective, it is nice to have such an understanding of those concepts. After all, they literally apply to us. It isn't like we can escape the chemistry that gets that consistently exists into us. But I don't see how it is laggy somehow. But, mhm, mhm. I I think I can get what you said then. Yeah. Um. Yeah. 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 I think it is something like, oh yeah, you have more control over what you do when it comes to physical. I guess that is why it is a software, and the chemistry is, yeah, the chemistry of the brain is something almost out of your control completely. But yeah, uh, I mean, to a certain extent it is like that, but also if you decide to take a deep dive into those concepts, you can discover a lot more control inside of those activities and inside of those reactions that seem so quote unquote mystical, because learning about them is also part of the process of comprehending how can you can mm, manipulate them so that you get those benefits that you have been wishing for. As in, let's say, um, if you are striving to avoid a burnout by observing simply how it happens, you get the opportunity of seeing what boxes are you already ticking and what things can you start to not have happen to you anymore. Because the main objective is always to be capable of getting the things that you want and avoiding the things that you do know are in no way beneficial to you. But once again, doing so is incredibly hard. And I have to accept that it is, once again, almost no fun. But I mean, If you need it, please keep learning, Olga. It is as fun as it gets, I guess. And even more, once again, to make sense out of something that happens to you is beneficial as it gets. As beneficial as it gets.
Anticipation of the reward is where it's biologically
yeah,
occurring when you can
continuing,
anticipate
well.
and count on it correctly. So in humans, it's harder to deliver, not impossible, food in a scanner, so that a very simple thing is done for reward, which is offering people money. So in a given trial in a scanner, you might see a meaningless cue like this, but you learn that this box predicts that at the end of this trial, you do many trials, you're going to get $1. Another one might be 10 cents. Another one they might take away $1. Okay, so this is like a good one to get. Like, I'm going to get $1 just sitting here. I'm going to get $1. Okay, all right? It's not huge. It's not the biggest reward in the world, but it's something for like just laying in a scanner doing nothing. And here's what happens. Your nucleus accumbens gets activated, where dopamine flows from the ventral tegmental area when you anticipate a reward. This is not when the reward comes. This is when you're anticipating the reward. And here's another picture. It's most powerful for when people anticipate a gain, a reward, and less responsive when people anticipate a loss. So it's about gains. Then the same system projects to the inferior parts of your frontal lobe. So now we're moving into the neocortex. And that part of the brain seems to respond most powerfully if you get the reward. So this is really interesting. A part of your brain that responds to the anticipation, the dopaminergic reward system, and then another part of the brain that responds not whether you anticipate it, but sometimes they trick you and they say, we're going to give you $1, and they go, oops, we're not giving it to you, okay? This part of the brain seems to register the receipt of the reward or not. So a separation of the brain between the anticipation of reward and the response to whether you get the reward or not. Older people, when they look at these kinds of similar reward paradigms, they respond, they're less responsive to potential loss, but equally responsive to potential gain as young adults. So that's exactly responding to positive things and showing less of a response to potential negative things. So let's switch to adolescence.
Yeah, I think here it comes once again into play what I tried to explain before, I guess, but the rest seems pretty obvious, and luckily enough, we kind of we had a lot of explanations here already about why that's happened, that your brain perceives such things, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think I can't really give much more of an explanation on that one, I hope. But before continuing, it depends on it depends on what you're talking about. What are you mentioning that is similar in older people and kids? Mhm. Merlin, older people have it being reduced. Okay, yeah, okay. I understand. Yeah, I mean, so far I think we haven't really dealt with what is substances inside of the brain besides gray and white matter. The rest is pretty. Merlin, what is another name for Merlin? I mean, we have observed basically that here, that yes, we have observed what this idea is, that basically you get less of an activation the older you are in some areas. I mean, here we have literally seen how older people get less of an activation when it comes to negative parts. Um, but yeah, here we're dealing with that. So clarity on point, I would say. Nice. But yeah, I didn't know about, yeah, I didn't know about Million. I I have to accept. But so far on point. Once again, on point. Correctly. Um, in this case, as as I said, what we are seeing is that basically that certainly it is correlated. Don't worry. I mean, don't say sorry. It is literally on point. Nothing better than that. I can say it is on point. Perfectly on point. That yeah, the more the older you get, a lot of parts stop activating in such a way. And I mean, I spent some time trying to explain some other processes as to why it also happens. Because not only the brain gets less activated, but also the pathways gets optimized with time and with enough repetition of certain actions. That is the other explanation for this. In most of the cases, because you get to learn more what is necessary for you to react when you're older, and when you're younger, you don't have the capacity of understanding enough what you really need to react to a certain extent. So once again, what you say is on point. Please don't say sorry. But yeah, meanwhile, continuing, I guess.
We're going to focus on adolescence now mostly for the next 10 minutes. You just got through that, okay? So let's reflect back to the last couple of years. And they make the experiments because they want to put children into it a little bit more vivid. Here's pirates, here's not much reward, here's some reward, here's a lot of reward, okay, in the scanner. And your children are adolescents or young adults. And they look in the nucleus accumbens, this reward region, and look who's firing like crazy. Adolescents, okay, teenagers. But they're not firing like crazy in the frontal cortex. So this is very speculative, and these are partly just wide stories. But one hypothesis is this, and we're going to say in a minute more about this. Adolescence is a really interesting period because it's not only when you're deciding like who you are in the world in many ways independently, it's also worrisomely for parents, grandparents, cousins, siblings, the period in life when people are most likely to put themselves at great risk. And one version of that is that the subcortical reward areas are developing way faster than the cortical areas that control and regulate your behavior, okay? So this goes with the stereotype, which is probably as unfair as any other stereotype of the out-of-control teenager, right? Okay. But imagine if it were true that your reward system is very turned up and your cortical control system were not yet caught up to the adult level. Well, that would make you a little bit more likely to do adventuresome things, right? Because the reward is powerful, and the control of your thoughts about how to approach that or reject that reward are less powerful. So, here's some things to think about and people worry about for adolescents. 40% of adult alcoholics report having initial alcoholism between 15 and 19. Between 16 and 20, both sexes have at least twice as likely to be in accidents than drivers between 20 and 50, twice the accidental rate. Adolescents more likely to engage in impulsive sexual behavior in multiple partners. Annually, 3 million adolescents contract with sexual transmitted diseases. So lots of things that are risky behaviors occur with high frequency in a demonstrable way on average among adolescents, okay? Young kids don't drive yet. 20-year-olds are a bit more mature in their driving. Part of this is, again, attitudinal. Here's a question that people were asked about future perspectives. They were asked, I would rather save my money for a rainy day than spend it on something fun right now. Okay. In your 20s, a little bit, but when you're 11, that's growing. You'll keep the dollar, but the younger you are in your teenage years, the more like, who wants to wait? Let's do it now. Okay. All right. So moving from something fun to something experimental, let's put together a couple last themes. So here's a thing we did before several times in this class.
Okay. Okay, it changes points here. Yeah, on one hand, what you say is true. On the other, Olga, the point itself that is trying to be postulated here is that it quote unquote is unknown. The proper explanation is throughout adolescence, there is a moment in which no, it was said here. There is there is not an overlap in which your rewarding pathways of the brain get developed at the same time as the rest of the behavioral monitoring part that does take control of how you should react to certain things or how you should want certain things. So, on one hand, while you want to experience things and you need to put yourself at risk, it also happens that you are having a higher a higher desire for things and a higher interest in things that you're not capable of holding yourself back from going to wish and going to try and obtain. That is, it wasn't fully mentioned, but it was partially said that a lot of adolescents pursue those pleasuring times and pleasuring experiences because what you are going for is the reward itself. The rest is not only not fully present in your mind. Only the good things are sometimes what you have in front of you. The consequences don't resist it as much, but it is the you can kind of make the argument here that it should supposedly be different because the human is rational and such things happen that you wouldn't want to pay so much attention and such to those things. But yeah, it is like that, certainly, that you sometimes put yourself in those situations too much and you take many more risks than what is really necessary. But yeah, I I think it is understood then. So far, continuing, because I think it didn't have that much more. The last point, sadly. Um, nah, there is rationality
creating
always.
false memories. And you remember the way that they create false memories in the laboratory is they pick a word they don't present to you, like sweet. Then they ask many students to say what words go with that word, like sour or candy or sugar. They present you this list. And then they test you for this word that was not presented. And people often imagine incorrectly that they heard or saw this word, right? We've done that a couple of times. It's a way to show illusory memories. And the way we understand it is basically this. Your memory, your mind, mostly thinks about the essence of things, not the details of things. The essence of things was everything is sweet. The details were the specific words in the list. Okay, so let's look at older adults versus younger adults, 80-year-olds versus 20-year-olds on exactly this experiment. Older adults have many more false memories, and they perform less well. So here's, to a scary extent, the healthy 70-year-olds, here's their real memories, here's their false memories. It's dead even, okay? Here's young people having lots of false memories, but not as many as older people, and having more correct memories. So older adults have more false memories because they're encoding the gist a lot, but they're losing the specifics. Does that make sense? Okay. Then you're really vulnerable to a false memory. Children, you might think, well, children, what do they know, right? Children have less false memories than you do. You would have had less false memories at age 5 than you would right now, which is kind of amazing. If you didn't do the experiment, you'd imagine children would be totally confused. They got a big list of words with sweet on the list. I don't know. Yeah, sure, right? Okay. No, a 5-year-old does better than a 7, does better than an 11-year-old, does better than a 20-year-old. Why? Why does a 5-year-old have less false memories in these circumstances? Well, we understand that to be the price of having a mind that understands a lot of gist. As you become older, you understand what's important, what counts. It's not the little details, it's the big concepts, right? So here's an example of, for example, how well people can relate words across sentences, and that grows from 6 to 9. And that's what we want. You don't want to read word, word, word. You want to say, what's the point of the sentence, right? Okay. That process of saying, I don't care about the detail, I care about the concept, the gist of the concept, it's like the chess players. You shed the specific details to gain the overall knowledge advantage. But the 5-year-old is not making the big picture. They're just getting the little details, so they're less prone to the illusory memories. And you can't see that, but this is just showing that when it comes to organizing memories, you see that develop across childhood. Okay, last couple things.
Okay, I was pretty sure that we already went over something like this. So very nice to hear that the standard was present here. But yeah. Basically, what you say, Olga. It happens that most of the time when you get older, you don't really need to have every single detail because you have already optimized what is the act of going through life. You only need to understand the underlying tone of things, and to do so, you fill a lot of gaps that are created by not being so present in the moment. And this also sadly leads to what is commonly referred as self-biased. What is it? Self-biased story, or no? What is the word? Self-biased. Sorry, self-serving bias. that was the word. A self-serving bias, because the more you get accustomed to feeling those voids, the more you get accustomed to also saying that what happened was certainly the way in which you perceived it to happening. And by doing so, you also lose the capacity of noticing things that are outside of your control and that didn't go according to what you were planning. And on the opposite hand, it is obvious that a kid wouldn't have that capacity because they don't even know most of the time, once again, what is going on. But it is overall, I think, yeah, it is shown here, it is unavoidable. There is no way in which you can say, wow, this doesn't happen to me as much or something like that. It is pretty evident that you have no capacity for avoiding it. But, I mean, it is still, yeah, I guess useful to know because at the very least for me, I see it as also something rather good to later on reflect because sometimes we forget that older people tend to self-serve a lot instead of simply saying, no, what? How this narrative that I created in my mind happened to not be the correct one, when in reality it is impossible for them to notice that what they filter the gaps in is not reality itself, only their own point of view. So yeah, that is another point done, I guess. Pretty understandable also, yes.
Because when I heard this a few years ago at the conference, I was so surprised by these findings. And I've been around long enough, I don't get as surprised as often as I used to. But it's kind of really interesting. It's a total twist, and you can make a judgment call about how to interpret it. But here's the experiments and the data. So again, we have this picture that everybody likes because it fits with the stereotype, right? Which is the teenager out of control. Their dopamine is going up there, and they're saying, let's do a lot of inappropriate things because it'll be rewarding, okay? And I know everybody's against it, but all right. So that's a stereotype, and probably there's something true about that. I mean, literally in the brain imaging, it looks somewhat true. But let's think about this one for a moment. So you're going to be good at this. If line A, these are lines, is longer than B, and line B is longer than line C, is A longer than C? Yes, all right, okay. This is MIT, right? Okay. All right. Now, answer this question truly. Think about it for a moment. Person A is a friend with person B. So let's pretend you're person B and your friend was A, and you're also a friend with C. Are A and C likely to be friends? Let's think about this. Is it mathematically transitive like this one? No. Let's think about it for a moment. In your experience through life, on average, are your friends mostly kind of going to like each other? Kind of, not all the time, but kind of. Yeah, probably because if they like you, if one person likes you, another person likes you, you share interests, you share background to a certain extent. It's in a loose statistical way. It's not definitive like this. So let's take a look what happens when you ask these two questions, grades 1 through 4. Okay, these kids are just making mistakes, right? And they're getting smarter. But look at this one. Go up just like that. So we can say this is a growth in logical ability. This is a growth in your everyday sense that I hang out with a certain kind of person. Maybe they like football, maybe they like, skating, maybe they like psychology, right? But that's the group I tend to hang out with, and they, on average, if I have a friend, it's because we share some interests or style of being, and if I have another friend, we probably share that too. So more than chance, they might like each other. Okay? So this is that idea that you can separate out what you might call purely logical analysis of things versus, in a sense, a growth of social experience, basically. So. The last 3 slides or so. You remember this from a bit back.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, pretty short point, but certainly you can see it as something understandable that the more you get to, once again, to understand where you are living and the different situations that do involve your existence and that make sense out of what you are and what your social group is, you can also get to explain to others things better. And in this case, you get to, even without interacting with others, know if somebody is going to have a good relationship with someone else or not, based on the capacity that you have of basing your own predictions, obviously, on your past experiences, once again. So yeah, pretty short point. I don't really see what else to add to that one. Yeah, understandable as it gets.
From a prior exam where we said there's a framing heuristic. If you're risk averse for gains, people are risk averse for gains, but they're risk taking for losses. So if we said, here's a program, we did this before. If program A is adopted, 200 people are saved, or here's 400 people will die out of 600. That's the same statement, but because this is stated as a gain, people usually like this. Because this is stated as a loss, people usually don't like this. Adults are risk averse for gains, and they're risk taking for losses. If something looks like a loss, roll the dice. If something looks like it's going to work out, go with it, even though numerically these are identical. Turns out that attitude, you can't see this, I can tell you, is not present in preschoolers or second graders. Preschoolers or second graders, when you give them these kinds of problems, they don't show the asymmetry for losses and gains. That's something that happens over time. And it's not a logical one. Logically, you should be that. So in that weird sense, the preschooler is more logical than you and I. More logical than you and I, okay? Because there's no reason to be statistically different for losses and gains. That's purely an attitudinal, emotional perspective. First of all, you can hear the information seeking.
What?
Let's check it out. That's kind of interesting. Swimming with sharks. That's kind of, you know, that's kind of, right? I mean, I assure you, 70-year-olds are not going to go,
What
hey, that could be
happened
kind of
there?
interesting. They're going like, no, terrible idea, don't do it. Okay, yeah.
Were they active with the group collectively?
Yes, you see some peer influence, right? Yeah, and that doesn't happen with adolescents, right? Right. So anyway, so everybody, you know, when they do this, they go, oh my gosh, these are these teenagers who are going to go do all these things and get horrible sexual diseases and drive while they're impaired, and you know that's just the beginning of their weekend, okay? All right, because they're not going to follow all the advice that we gave them for years and years and years and years at home and in school. So here's the flip on this, and just think about it for a moment. And it's complicated. Swimming with sharks. The adults say, you don't have to tell me anymore. It's a bad idea. The gist is sharks bad, okay? I don't even need to hear any of the rest of the story. Adolescents start to weigh the factors. We'd be safer in a group. Is it darker nights outside, right? You know, how shallow is the water, right? And you could say, well, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's not totally ridiculous because when we talk about danger, those are some of the things you might start to think about. So so by this analysis, having unprotected sex, adults, you know, bad, okay? I mean, really bad. I mean, you're right. Adolescents. Well, let's think about this. You know, what's the gain? Well, you know, we hear that sex is highly pleasurable. What's the loss? All these things everybody's telling us. What's the odds, purely statistically, that for a single sexual experience, you will have the pleasure of sex, but you will end up with a terrible disease? What's the odds for one outing? What do you think? Here's the complexity. Some people are arguing that adolescents are actually more accurate in their assessment of risk. They're not wise in their choice, okay? Do you understand the point? Okay? But they're actually doing the calculation, whereas adults just go, oh, sharks bad. Sexually transmitted diseases, avoid, okay? Because you're not parsing through the exact odds and circumstances, the trade-offs between exploration and pleasure and responsibility and safety. You just have the gist, the line, that's it. That's my wisdom, you know, that I've gotten. Sharks bad, sexually transmitted disease bad. Okay, that's it. And these teenagers are kind of curiously thinking about what are the factors. You could say it's not the best analysis, but you could say it's almost more rational. Just like the older adults will make more gist errors in memory, will be more emotional in their avoidance of risk, right? Okay, so it's very complicated. It's not just dopamine flushing, it's also in the brain, right? It's also something about how risk is perceived and understood at different ages and what information is available to you. All right, thanks very much.
Oh man, pretty. Yeah, I mean, pretty understandable, I guess. I feel this one, but yeah, that's everything this time around, man. I mean, we did take our time, almost 4 hours, but we have come to a closure. Very nice, very good. I feel like yeah, this time around we didn't have that many deep concepts. I feel like also sadly, so we can live with a smile, know that we didn't leave anything to trace. Yeah, I guess we're going to to rate someone. That's everything for today. That was wonderful. And well, no, yeah. Trying to skim. I think I didn't leave nothing of particular importance behind. So we can move. And we can say once again our goodbyes. But yeah, this has been a very good one, and this has been also a very entertaining one. But we have to call it a day here. Today we are reading Monkey, who is playing retro. I don't know which one, but yeah. Thanks for everything, people. This is, as always, a pleasure to do. Please remember to stay safe, remember to stay nice, remember to stay good, and well, until next one. We will see what happens, and if it don't, at the very least, we did our very best. So yeah, thanks for everything. Now, as I said, right, Monkey, who is doing retro.